What is going on, everybody? Welcome. It is SCP CRNP, aka Lack of Lepers, and thank you for joining me tonight on Friday night at 7:30 p.m. CST. This is our weekly collapsible, really called the Weekend Collapsible. This is where we go over every single SCP article that was written this week for the SCP Wiki. Thanks for joining. How are you? Awesome. Glad to hear that. So before we get really going tonight, because we do need to get going, okay? The Wiki had a more productive week than last week, which I know is not saying much because we had about five articles last week. So we've tripled that this week at about 15. It's really 14. So it's kind of been a, less than center kind of average week for the Wiki. So it's nice to see things picking back up again. And I think I'm really kind of excited about this week. We really have some great entries. Excuse me for 1 second. Gonna need the fan on for this one. This is gonna be a steamy, spicy, saucy week of SCPs. I really like the spread here. I'm interested to see how they're gonna land and fall on the tier maker that we get. So let's just go over a couple things before we get started here. First and foremost, Harmony is not going to be joining us tonight. She has a previous engagement, so we wish her well, and hopefully we will see her here back. That's a tongue twister. Her here back again, maybe next week. And then I have to take a moment, just one moment here, to not shill, but just spread the word. I'm not really shilling because I'm not involved in this, kinda. But so today is the last day of IndieCon, and if you haven't been following, which I don't suspect that you have, IndieCon is the first. This is our homepage, by the way. Doesn't it look good? I like it. I'm a big fan. So IndieCon 2022. This is what happens when you open up conficmagazine.com. These days, it's been this way for a little while. And so anyway, this is a contest. It's the first independent containment fiction contest. So we have entries in this. I'll just read this aloud because it's the easiest way to do it. IndieCon is the first writing contest featuring a platform-independent approach to containment fiction. Entrants can choose whatever format they wish, whether it's existing formats like SCP or RPC, or their own, which can be proprietary if they like. They don't necessarily have to release that under Creative Commons, you see. The authors of entries are not revealed until the end of the contest to help establish quality-centric voting. The winner is awarded $250 in prize money. Winner takes all. And the contest's theme is statues. You can read more about it if you want to. But today is the last day of voting. We got a really nice spread of entries here. Some are indie, some are tales, some are RPCs. One is a chaos insurgency. We didn't get any SCPs. I'm not surprised. But I am very, very pleased with the number, the quantity, and the quality of the entries that we got out of this contest. So this is really cool. The winner obviously will get this money, and then will be featured on the magazine, first, I guess. These other ones probably will be at some point too. So anyway, check this out if you haven't. Voting occurs in our Discord, so this is the last day of voting. It's been an exciting race. I think we're zoning in on a winner. But if you are interested and you don't mind joining our server, on our Discord server, and you would like to read the entries or vote on the entries that you may have already read, then definitely check that out. That's very exciting. And we won't be doing an article for Confic Magazine this week for this reason, because I kind of just wanted to be spotlit. There's a ton of things to read here. So hopefully this can stand in for any actual post this week. And people can enjoy the contest and its results. I've been pretty pleased with that. So before we get started, just to review the tier list. The best category at top, is weightlifting the whole SCP Wiki. The next one down, which is better than average, but not excellent, is Array of Hope. And then average is meh. Below average is so bad I didn't finish it, which is also sort of a catch-all for articles that may just go on for a little too long, and you don't have time for this anymore. And then the very last tier is actively lowering the bar. So these are articles that aren't just bad. Saying that they're bad doesn't quite cut it. You have to add a little bit in, and they're actually sort of modeling absolutely corrosive behaviors for the wiki. So that's what we're going to be doing, and this week started on the 8th of July. We ended last week on the 7th. So this is the 8th of July, and it went through the 14th. So as you can see, this is kind of a decently paced week until we get to yesterday, where 5 articles were released. It would have been 9, which would have been a little nicer for me, but we ended up having 5 articles in one day, and so now we're at 14. So we'll take a look at each of these, we'll synopsize them, and then we'll talk about them as well. Of course, if you are hanging out and you would like to comment on some of these, hopefully you're not the author. Everybody would like to be their own critic, obviously. So if you're the author, maybe not. But if you have read these and you have something to say, I'll try to remember to look at the chat. I'm not habituated to that, but give it your best shot. It's bound to happen one day. Okay, so we will start. Let's just jump right into things. So the first one is SCP-6958, and I'm going to try to get into the habit of reading these titles. So the title of this one is The Tower and Those That We Have Lost. Very poetic. I like that title. That's a nice title. I got to get more background music. I got to get different background music. Tell you what.
I've been getting paid $1,000.
Have you?
Not more.
Oh, that's amazing. Sorry, we got to watch this ad. All right, let's just hit up here. We're just going to do this one. Okay. Anyways, so welcome back. So this is SCP-6958. So interesting picture here. Not the prettiest thing to look at, but it's all good. The tip of the -1 can be seen in the middle of the photo, which I guess is, I'm still not sure, to be honest with you, because the middle of the photo is kind of like right there. You can kind of see it. Can we actually zoom in on this? It's just a little strange. I guess that's it right there. I guess. I don't know. It kind of looks like a tree limb, but apparently it's this tower. I'm surely they're not talking about this right here, because that's part of the wall, and it certainly isn't in the middle of the photo. Oh, God, I just exited the tier. Oh, hell. Okay, hold on. This is the worst produced show in the world. We've also lost our music. Here we go. This is the worst produced show ever. Whoops. Let's go to my account. Can I? Oh, here we go. Oh, yeah. Hold on. Let's go back. What's the date? It's the 15th? Oh, thank God it saved it. Wow, this thing is so much smarter than me. Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. So this is a SCP-6958. Let's move past the photo, which is nice, I guess. So the containment let's just go into what this is. So this is a series of structures located somewhere. It comprises of 2 circular walls, an outer wall and inner wall. Both are separated by some distance. At the center is this very, very tall tower designated -1. And there's a maze in between. And the maze plays with reality such that if you go through that maze, it sort of changes and is sort of alive. It sort of is topologically alive and will change to not match the schematics that you may have, gotten from some reconnaissance. So the Conprox, they're very dense. It doesn't look like it, but it's very difficult to wade through this. They're very dense. There's a lot that is said here without actually saying much. We get information, but it's all coded and sort of vague. And the takeaway is a pretty routine treatment of people who trespass on an exclusion zone. That's really it. So in this way, I'd say that the Conprox are less than appealing to start the article here and don't really set the stage interestingly or hook the reader in any way. And that's really the minimum that I ask for when it comes to Conprox, is to at least do that. That's kind of the job of Conprox, is to set the stage, kind of give an ambiance, some set work, to what you're doing, and hopefully just give us a decent reason to start reading this article. It's different for me because I'm a completionist and I'm reading all of these articles. But, for the average reader, you might want to, they're not going to have that same approach. So you might need to pull them in. That's what Conprox are for. It's like the first few pages of your book. You gotta sell them on the first few pages so they want to keep reading. So this doesn't really do its job, I think, which is, kind of lends to the neutrality of this article, in my opinion. And so we get into the description, but let's see. Before that, we have some issues in the Conprox. So this phrase, "the offenders are to be immediately removed." I know this is like a thing, right? Like this is not, this is way above me, right? But this whole thing of like saying the dash, the S and the apostrophe is just confusing to me, because you necessarily are going to miss with the rest of the sentence, right? It always seems like a strange decision to me, especially since earlier in this section, trespassers, plural, is used. So I'm not too sure why we wouldn't be okay with using offenders in this situation. And just the parenthetical to me makes the grammar wrong one way, no matter what way. If you're going to read it as offender, it's wrong. And if you read it as offenders, it's just, it doesn't commit, I guess. When the previous instances of this in the Conprox definitely do commit. Like, so trespassers, we don't have the apostrophe or the parenthetical S. I don't know why it shows up here. I guess just was, a little nitpick, something I'm not too sure about that. But anyway, like I said, the anomaly here is sort of a group type, in this instance, structures. And the way that they're arranged here sort of reminds me of the city in Attack on Titan. You know how they have the little layers and stuff. But like I said, there's the addition of a maze in the middle. And we kind of start to read, and the article starts to go from here and introduces a mobile task force that explores this place, talks a little bit about its discovery, and so on and so on. And this is a rather long article. It's rather dense article. So I think that just from the Conprox, that sort of vibe we got there, I think that unfortunately continues its way throughout the whole rest of the article. It doesn't really pick up or build up a lot of energy. It sort of is that all the way through, with some interesting moments, I think, here and there. But there are also issues as well. So this sentence, for example, to date, no ground team has made it through the maze, and access into Zone B is done through helicopter landing at site, whatever. This is something that we'll see numerous times today. Unfortunately, this week is authors not really having the precision that they need with their clinical tone. So anytime you're tempted to use the word done in like a verb sense, it's probably the wrong move. So if you read the sentence, to date, no ground team has made it through the maze, and access into zone is done through a helicopter landing. That does not read well at all. It's a really sour clinical note. Don't use the word done. It makes you sound like a hick, right? Gonna get it done. Done observed these things. I've done observed these things. Dang, this mobile task force done gone observed this thing. So don't do that, okay? It just sounds bad. Don't do that. The anomaly, as we continue, is decorated with some anti-memetic-like effects. The tower specifically that's in the center of this thing, which I guess is really why there's nothing here in the picture now that I think about it. So that's pretty cool. But it's given like this archaeological tone, very puzzling and perplexing, something like a Göbekli Tepe. I don't know if you know about that. Göbekli Tepe. Did I spell that right? I'm very proud of myself. Yeah, like just a historical Neolithic archaeological site that's of some significance to the development of humanity. So this kind of gives that little vibe to it, and the picture captures that well, I think. So, for what that's worth. Grammatically, I feel this article leaves out very needed commas, which constantly muddies the read, and I find myself having to go back and sort of recontextualize phrases and really rework them much, much harder than I probably should have to in order for the sentences to read swimmingly. You'll have these phrases that really stand on their own, that aren't attached to the preceding or following phrases, but there's no comma to sort of tip you off to that. And so you sort of have to carve your own path through the sentence. And that doesn't sound like a big deal, I guess, but that's really the function of commas, which is to more smoothly guide the reader through the components of a sentence. So I don't know why there's such an aversion, it seems, in this article from the author here. It really just increases the difficulty of the read tremendously. And that's part of what I mean when I say this is a decently long article, but just getting through it, it feels very tough. The things are not conducive to a pleasurable read, in my opinion. And there's also some very almost comical missteps as we get a little further in the article. So we get into, for example, this exploration zone, exploration log, and we start to read these things. I didn't think this was too bad until we get to moments like this. There's so many things wrong with this. So this line right here redacts an expletive, and so if you're doing this as an author, you really risk the reader being taken out, vacuumed out of the read at this point, because someone, certainly myself, is going to ask, why is this necessary, right? Why is the Foundation so keen on making an exploration log PG, right? Like, why is it taking the time to censor out expletives? What rules are they using to determine what an expletive is, right? What are those parameters, right? It just brings up a whole bunch of questions that we know the author can't answer, right? So, these are just strange inclusions, and it's also very odd, the formatting here. Anybody who knows anything about Wikidot knows that these double, brackets are kind of how you start syntax on the wiki, and so it just seems like the author's either tipping their hat to that or just kind of subconsciously, almost unawares, doing that. And so it just kind of reads a little strange. I don't know why they would have put two brackets in there. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. And there are other moments of this sort of perplexity as well. As this individual passes another corner, he notices only the sounds of his breathing and running. That is not a possible thing for the people who are writing this document to know. So you don't know when you're observing someone else running that they only notice the sound of their own breathing and running. That's not something that you have access to from a documentary standpoint, right? From a clinical standpoint. So the epistemology of this article is poorly understood here. These things just sort of, they kind of glare out. No one of them is very egregious, but in addition, they really culminate and start to really, really, really weigh down the read, unfortunately. We do get a nice little germinal phrase of this article, which is right here. It comes down at the end of the description here. Should a section of the tapestry, of course there's a tapestry sitting in this tower, -1, should a section of the tapestry be removed or destroyed, the cultures, there's that parenthetical S again, and or languages, there's another parenthetical S, are removed from reality following a 6-hour period. So it's sort of this like when you die in the video game, you die in real life, right? Kind of thing. So if your culture is removed from this tapestry that exists in the center of this structure, it's like it never existed at all. It sort of ontologically erases it forever, right? That is what it is. I thought that was just a nice moment that kind of centers the whole article here. I will say the good things about this article, it's really crisp and careful clinical tone. But like I said, clinical tone is a technical thing, and there's really no point bringing it along as good as it might be if the prose is filled with, untechnical density that makes the read very unengaging, such as the commas or the things we just looked at. So the Mobile Task Force exploration log ends up kind of, in my opinion, being very tired and very cliche with this very rote development and action sequence. We get introduced to some mysterious entities that are really quite unexciting. I don't really care to know anything more about them, in part due to the very plastic portrayal of them as these exotically esoteric and mystical type people. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. So, they show up as 4 question marks in the in the transcript, and it's saying things like the partition, the place beyond the walls that surround you, wherein all things lost and forgotten lie. Places long broken, pieced together. It just seems like there's this very forced sort of accent of that's supposed to convey this like really, exotic mystique. And this happens a lot. It's just a cheap treatment for characterization. I don't think it plays very well here at all. It sort of comes off as, kind of trite. So I did not finish this article. I felt like I got through it. I felt very, very tired reading this article, and then I looked at the scroll bar, and there was a ways to go. So I didn't finish this article, okay? Mostly due to the lack of promise halfway through, and the Tetris-like dropping of one paragraph of dense exposition after the other. So this is SCP-6958. Let me find it. 69... baby. Oh, did I not? Oh, here's the second row. 6958. I have to say it was so bad that I didn't finish it. I mean, honestly, the whole quality of it is kind of more of the meh category, and surely I weigh things like clinical tone and syntax probably a little heavier than other people. But, the way I look at it is that, halfway in, I was having a very unpleasant time reading this article, and I think it gave me plenty of justification to just understand that that's about as good as it was probably going to get, okay? So let's just go to the comments, because maybe somebody has something a lot nicer to say, so maybe we can kind of salvage this. It's retreading 140s, which is Davites. I think it has something to do with Davites. People didn't find it derivative. Yeah, so some people liked it, obviously. It's got a decent rating at, what is it, like plus 20, something like that? So that's plus 18. So, I mean, that's fair, right? That's fair. I think that's probably where it should be. So, all right. So that is SCP 6958, and our first one for the night. The next one is a joke. SCP-5846. Always curious as to how they choose these joke numbers. You know, what goes behind that? Who knows? All right, let's take a peek. All right. So, this is a joke article, and immediately we are told that it is by an author named Staffer, who, if anyone is watching this show, surely you understand we've had our eye on for the last month or so, in part involuntarily, because Staffer has decided to go RPC-90, right, which is that gun from James Bond, 007, RPC-90. It's not the RPC Authority. RPC-90 Golden Eye, right? RPC-90, which is sort of like an auto-fire automatic rifle that spits out bullets as fast as it possibly can and is known for its rate of fire. And so that's kind of what Staffer is doing, is really on auto-fire and really almost to the point of obnoxiousness, in my opinion. So this doesn't help that we're having, I think, at least 2 other articles from Staffer this week. Staffer seems to sort of latch on to a lot of very superficial collaborations with people. In this case, it's Fishish, who I'm obviously not a big fan of when it comes to the composition of their work. So, you know, I try not to let my opinions of the person get in the way of the article. I feel it's fair to, in the interest of being somewhat professional in this, to communicate my biases, you know, at the beginning of such an article, so that full disclosure can be given, so that y'all can at least, you know, have that information to help you contextualize my my assessment of this article. I do try to be as unbiased as possible, though, when I look at these. I don't think it's going to matter too much, because this one I just did not like at all. So we have this notice from the Pataphysics department, which has this random tittle right there hanging out. I don't know if there's supposed to be another one, but I don't know what it's doing there. It says, on this date, the following footnotes anomalously appeared on this document, which is an actual SCP. The identities of the entities, which rhymes, referred to as Staffer and Fishish, are as of yet unknown. A warning of highly meta references are to be noted. There's actually an extra, oh, it's not a space, it's a footnote. So, you know, this is really like 3 strikes you're out for me already by the end of this little notice that's purple up here. This almost instantly goes into the so bad I didn't finish article. Like, I'm already there at this point, because this is just kind of cringy, you know, to have this, you know, obviously reference your own names. But it is a J, so you got to cut it some slack. You know, if this was a main lister, I think it'd be over with by now for me. It was that quick. But it's a J, so, you know, you gotta kind of loosen that just a little bit, and we'll continue onwards, okay? But I do still think that the introduction is such a desperate author advertisement, and is just incredibly off-putting, and does absolutely nothing to prime this for any sort of effective humor, in my opinion. None of this is funny, not even the footnote, which by the way is so blended in to the background color of this div that was selected that I didn't even know it was there the first 2 or 3 times I looked at this article. I mean, maybe that's what they're going for here, but it's, I mean, you can't really see it. So it comes off as really bad visual designs. And then the other thing that I don't like, really what would have been the 3rd strike. First strike is this whole notice. The 2nd strike is listing the authors. And the 3rd strike would be, if this were not a J, that it's 100% derivative and reliant upon an article that I haven't read. And so I'm immediately faced with the option to go read the entirety of SCP-5846 in order to get the joke, okay? And that might not be true, but that certainly is what is being stated here. Whether it's true or not, that's really the posturing that the author is taking by, first of all, listing it out here in the intro. But second of all, this is something that we see a lot of on the wiki these days, unfortunately. It's this trend of people taking their own articles, like their own main lister articles, and then making a joke about them, like making a joke version of them. We saw this a lot in the April Fools this year. And, you know, that's really a bad formula. That's really a bad start, you know, very, very low probability play. Because the problem with that is that clearly you are trying to bring more attention to your own articles. That's really why you're doing that, right? That's first and foremost. That's very, very clear. No one, I think, is fooled by that. And second of all, those things have always existed on the wiki. You know, the Plague Fellow, you know, the Broke God, you know, the SCP 4000 joke. There's all these all over the wiki, right? But if you'll notice, all the ones, you know, prior to, I guess, this year, in the last few months, really try to do this with very well-known articles, right? And I'm not trying to say that you can only do this with well-known articles. Everybody, I think, understands very clearly that I don't really like to put a lot of stock in the fact that one given article is more popular than another on the SCP Wiki. But, you know, there is something to be said for joking around about a well-known article as opposed to this very obscure one. And it is from that that it's very clear that the authors are really, this is really an exercise in self-advertisement. That's really what this boils down to. And that's not necessarily a killer, a deal breaker, but it just doesn't set anything off on the right foot to be funny, right? Because generally when we think of a J article or something that's successful, it's because it started with a good idea and a good joke. This one instead starts with an SCP and asks how it can make it into a joke. And so you really put the cart before the horse, and this whole thing is really not really set up for success, in my opinion. So having said that, I don't necessarily think that you have to go read this SCP-5846 to get the joke, because it's basically just a recreation of SCP-5846. It's basically just a copy and paste. So now you basically have this article on the wiki twice. So, you know, the only difference obviously are these footnotes that are added all over the place. You can see them basically pop up after every sentence. And that's the joke. The joke really attempts to be the commentary that you see on the article in these footnotes. So I do think it's pretty cool, by the way, that they are able to have two parallel chains and lines of footnotes. So you'll see that we are at, you know, 6 or 8 commentary pataphysical footnotes by the end of the first paragraph of the description. But true to the actual article, this footnote seems to be, I don't know, there's like, it's so strange. There's a footnote in a footnote. I don't really know. This is very odd. I wish I could actually see the footnotes. Here they are. 89. Okay, so they even footnote the footnote section down here. So that's pretty funny, and it just got a laugh out of me. So I don't know if I've just basically invalidated the rest of my critique that basically says I don't like this article. So anyways, the rest of the article, I think, in my opinion, is very unentertaining and unfunny. It's nearly masturbatory meanderings of the author's commentary on their own work. So nothing about this makes me smirk. You know, like I said, I just laughed at this, but I think it's almost out of ridiculousness, not in a flattering way. Like, I can't believe you did that. Instead, it's sort of this new level, this sort of like pushing the envelope level of obnoxiousness that ultimately communicates and belies the author's sense of self-importance. That's kind of what I get from this. We are essentially treated to a late-night exchange in dialogue from a place like SCPD, put into footnotes, and this is supposed to be, you know, clever and cute. It's not. The conversation is not very exciting, and it's comes off as kind of dull, and it really doesn't strike any funny note in me, at least, at all. And I love to laugh, so believe it or not. We do see the author self-exposit as much as they possibly can in the comments. There's even one, I mean, basically they're just talking about themselves, talking about their articles, if you've ever sort of seen Pop-Up Video, this is a really old show, I'm kind of dating myself, but Pop-Up Video was a show that came on VH1, which people might even not know what VH1 was or is, but yeah, VH1 was sort of like an MTV competitor. that didn't do as well, I guess. But anyway, there was this show called Pop-Up Video where it played music videos, kind of like this one, and it would just pop up sort of like meta commentary, like facts about it. And so that's kind of what this article is doing. And there's one footnote that I can't find. It just sort of tries to make fun of itself in a self-depreciatory way, but it doesn't come off that way. It really comes off as the author trying to be more interesting and trying to make this article more interesting than it is, or at least how it was received. You can see in this footnote 14 just how obnoxious the commentary is. And I just can't imagine the position that someone would have to be in from an authorial position to think that this is, gonna elicit a laugh in people. Just totally different. I mean, that's just their thing. This is obviously not my thing. So, but there's one footnote, there's one self-commentary that says the following: the main reason I chose to do this article is because it's the article I'm second most proud of. So that's the author to staffer saying that. The reason that I'm doing this joke is because I'm very proud of SCP 5846. So is that a good reason to do this? Probably not. So the whole thing comes off as basically just a microwaved article, rewarmed in order for this author, whose charm again is sort of waning due to writer bot sort of tendencies, to just re-advertise an article that they want to bask more glowingly in the self-adoration of. It's quite sickening. I think the only thing clever about this article is that it sort of has this Mystery Science Theater 3000 approach to an article, but as opposed to Mystery Science Theater 3000, it doesn't really have any of the cleverness that you would see in that. The good idea of adding commentary like this to your own article is immediately sucked away by the fact that none of the lines have any of that MST3K wit. None of them. In fact, it doesn't really seem like it's interested in making fun of the article. It's interested in just sort of adding bubblegum pop, sort of very low IQ commentary to this article, right? So, I mean, the point of the Mystery Science Theater 3000 successful formula is to make fun of what it is that you're commenting on. The author doesn't want to do that here because obviously they're very proud of this article. So you really miss the whole promise of the premise by choosing this highly self-flattering decision and direction for this joke. It's not really a joke article. It's very serious. The author is trying to very seriously tell you how good they think their own article is. So for me, the article creates a distaste that I don't often express this strongly or cynically. I try to be a little more measured than this. This is me probably at my most acidic that I'll get here on the microphone. I can certainly get more acidic in text, but something about speaking with one another makes us a little more friendlier. But I'm usually not this caustic when it comes to my opinion of an article, but I think this is just an absolutely terrible joke article. I think it's god-awful. I'm having a hard time imagining what it must be like to think that this is a good idea, or funny, actually, for that matter. So this is SCP-5846, and as you can guess, this is very firmly in the category of lowering the bar, in my opinion. This is just a sad thing to see. It's a sad day for the wiki. It's not doing great, I guess. But to Staffer seems to be kind of okay with living there, so that you got to give him that. But people seem to like this. I don't really want to go into the comments, just to be honest with you. So anyway, that's that. Second article. Let's take a look. Not good so far for the first two, but let's keep moving on because there are some really, really excellent articles here this week. Just really good shit. So we'll get to that hopefully pretty soon. So this next one is not it. In fact, I'll go ahead and just spoil the suspense. And this is SCP-6508. If I can find it, you guys. Did I not do it? There it is. But it is in Meh, which is better than the first two. So let's talk about that. So this is a interesting article just off the get-go. I think this is a very beautiful picture. Octopus, man, they're so crazy. They're so alien. They're so smart, if you've ever studied with them before, which I did in invertebrate zoology. But they're very interesting little things and very, very smart. So, and very beautiful. Look at this nice pink and purple coloration. I really like that quite a lot. But an image does not an article make, right? And so the image is just the image. Let's get to the writing. So this is a collection of 32 aquariums located in some store in Spain. All of the aquariums are populated by marine animals. Any mass of water, which should have been the word volume of water and not mass, but that's okay too. Any mass of water within the SCP will exhibit its anomalous effects. Okay, if a living human being comes into contact with this water mass, it will become a -1 instance, and a -1 instance basically manifests the physical traits from one of the animals that are present in this shop. So you basically touch the water and you become something, some sort of marine animal that is maybe in the tank that you touched. Okay? So the article doesn't spend a lot of time in an interesting way with any of the potential variation of these -1 instances. So as we go to Addendum 1, we get to a table, and it basically just lists out a comprehensive list of the currently known -1 instances. There's only 4 of them, and basically it just tells you, the name of the person, their previous occupation, what they turned into, what marine animal they turned into. So that's really the whole purpose of this addendum and table. And so I think, it doesn't really move much. It's a little bit of a letdown. I think it's presented here with very little imagination. It doesn't really contribute to any serious movement in the actual article. I almost feel like it could be completely removed and nothing would change except for just the number of the addenda, obviously. Some movement and motion happens in the second addendum, which is a nice and quiet little transcript that has some subdued banter in it. It takes a very sharp turn towards the end, which I suppose is fitting since this described in this transcript was an accident, unexpected accident. So there's a bit of odd procedures in here at the end. Basically what happens is this individual only partially gets converted into an octopus, so he's like half octopus, half man. And for some reason, the Foundation is allowing this -1 to keep their job at the Foundation, which is to be a janitor, and essentially walk around the site uncontained as a half man, half octopus. I don't really know why that happens. It just kind of does. And then as we get down to the third addendum, actually, before we get to the third addendum, while we're here, there's some very uneffortful and slothful moments in the writing here. So let's take a look at that. We are in Addendum 3, excuse me. So this addendum is a transcript of a second incident, so we get the introductory sentence here to the log, and this is what it says. Mr. Martel and Agent Semper are present in the building where SCP-6508 is located. I mean, do you even need that sentence? Like, it doesn't tell you anything. We obviously understand that they're in the building where this thing is located. I don't really know what the sentence is doing here. At least it's only one sentence, but like I'm saying, this is just, you get the persistent impression that this article is not really putting forth very much effort, and it just sort of barely maybe even has the ability to do so. It just seems very, very slothful writing, very lackadaisical writing. But the blocking in the third addendum here is also a problem. It's very, very awkward and unexamined. So, for example, if we read on just a little bit, these two characters, Agent Semper and Martel, they have a little brief primer of discussion here. Are you doing all right? Yes. It's no big deal. Okay. And then the next line says that both of them remain silent for the next 30 minutes. So, I'm not really sure, what's going on with that. And then right after those 30 minutes of basically silence, right, which is awkward enough to imagine, the Foundation agent says, "Hey, I'll be right back. I need to go to the restroom." And so this guy says, "Okay." And then the agent leaves. And it just so happens that the agent leaves so that the plot can advance. So the plot at this point of this article is teleporting people where it wants them to go in a magical fashion. But it's doing so. It takes about 30 minutes for it to do that. So I don't know why. But that's where we are here. And then the very last transcript of this article, I think, is really where the article sort of picks up a little bit. It really sort of compensates for a lot of flaws that I think the article has, and ultimately puts it in that meh category for me. It's really this last transcript, this last note. So it sort of has this in-your-face sort of pro-rebellion attitude and sort of this subversive strife sort of tone to it. There's some really nice notes of situational emotion in this ending note. So, for example, this is obviously a tragedy of the article where this guy is transformed into this -1 instance and now has to be sort of a captive, so to speak, of the Foundation. We understand how awful that must be in so many ways for our pseudo-tagonist here. Yeah, I think it's a nice little cleanup at the end, cleanup on aisle 2 kind of thing. It even throws in a little bit of lore, so the serpent's hand kind of is folded into this. So it's buttressed with some site lore to help it out just a little bit, but even then, I don't think the serpent hand inclusion is very well situated. Why would the serpent's hand be focusing time and energy on, essentially some water that will turn you into whatever captive marine creature happens to be around? I just don't know. It seems useless unless there is even a captive creature in there, so you kind of have to be taking one with the other. It's almost like one time this is back when I was a young man, and I went to the beach. And at the beach, on surf shops, they have like these little turtles in these little like little tiny little plastic boxes, like little baby turtles. And I thought they were really cute. I mean, who doesn't? So I bought one because I was an idiot. And so I had a friend who was really, really into keeping reptiles and insects. He got like tarantulas and all this weird stuff, scorpions, And so I thought to myself, this guy would love a turtle, right? A turtle would fit right in with this stuff. And so I came back from the beach. I had on my dashboard this little turtle, chilling in his little home. And I make a stop on the way home by this guy's apartment. And I'm like, hey, I got you a surprise. And he's like, okay. And I show him the turtle. I'm like, I got you a turtle. And he was like, he literally looked me dead in the eye and he was like, no, thanks. And it's because taking care of a turtle, I found out later in the following months before I gave it away for free to anyone who would take it, is actually an incredibly frustrating and challenging thing to do. They poop all over the place. It's amazing what you have to do to keep those tanks clean. I just don't understand why the serpent's hand would want anything to do with this. So ultimately, this is kind of a sleepy, rather lethargic article, topically, movement-wise, action-wise. It's not very kinetic in any way, and the whole execution feels a little dreamy, a little sleepy, in my opinion. So that's why it got the meh. I think it, did some good things at the end there. So, want to give it some credit for that. Okay. Now, next article, we're dipping back into Series 5? Hell yeah. That's my kind of series right there. All right, so this is SCP-4728, and, I'm trying a little different approach here, going to the tier maker first when I come across an article so that I can kind of get that out of the way with, I guess, and then tell you what I think. So, maybe this is a nicer way to do this. I don't know. SCP-4728, I think, is actively making the wiki worse, and I'll tell you why. So we have a million animals that talk articles. We have a million of them on the wiki. I know you think that there's only 7,000 articles, but that's not true. There are millions of them, and millions of those are animals that talk, okay? Almost all of these millions of talking animal articles are inexplicably fluent in English. That obviously being a hand wave from the author so that the piece can work. Almost all of these millions of animal talking articles feature an over-gestured, quasi-noble characterization of the animal. Almost all of them feature interview logs where the author wink-winks and nudge-nudges the absurdity of the situation as if it was something still novel that could be shared in jest and enjoyment between the author and the reader. Almost all of these talking animal articles have dialogues that are based on cultural misunderstandings due to an unfamiliarity with living as a blank. Insert the animal there. The humor attempts itself from a tired and prolapsed orifice of fumbling what would be pseudo-diplomatic language. The Foundation agents and researchers are constantly trying not to offend this talking animal, but inevitably it offends the talking animal because they just have no idea what it's like to be a talking animal. Whether it's a flamingo or a toad, or in this case, a salamander. In these articles, any etc. humor is often attempted by non-starters of anomalous traits that the talking animal entity itself exaggerates itself as having when it doesn't really have those things. So, every time, almost every single time, it's almost like I almost want to design a bingo card that I pull out every time I come across a talking animal article so that I can get bingo every time. Because I think I would. Because every single one has all of the traits that I just mentioned. You know, it's very rare. The one thing that this article doesn't have that most talking animal articles have is a note or a development or an escalation at the end where the talking animal enters into the documentation and speaks to the Foundation directly through the documentation. But other than that, this article right here, in a blazing fire of unawareness and perhaps ignorance, checks all of these boxes that I just mentioned very, very quickly. So, for example, we have sapience and the ability to verbally communicate with other species, human and non-human alike. We have the over-gestured pseudo-royal characterization, primarily speaks in grandiose verbiage in relation to itself. We have it be fluent in English, right here. We have its non-starters of greatly self-exaggerated anomalous qualities. In reality, despite its claims of a number of powerful paranormal and reality working capabilities, the only confirmed anomalous capabilities so far consist of intelligence. Yada yada yada. So this article, by the second paragraph of the description, is already firmly in the category, to me, of so bad that I didn't finish it. And it's true that I didn't finish this article because it was that bad in my opinion, but that's not really enough to me. This sort of article happens so often on the wiki. It's like a scourge of the wiki, honestly. It's alarming and amazing all at once that the collective cry from the SCP Wiki regarding why you have to have very involved and opulent amounts of narrative in your SCP is often sounding like this. We've done Series 1 to death, right? And it's just very strange to me that the same threshold of tired ideas being done ad infinitum is not applied in the same way to the talking animal trope and all of its attendant, expected, and nearly invariant features. So that's why this article goes, 4728 goes into actively lowering the bar. I am pining for the day when somebody writes a talking animal that is good. We kind of had one. Uncle Nicolini did a translation article that was a Spanish one about the cat noir a few weeks ago that I think was decent. It was certainly above average for a talking animal article. But most of them are just absolutely terrible. The comments are really a mixed bag here. People say that they enjoyed it despite it being devoid of any real substance. A lot of people seem to like this -1's lines, which I totally get. It's got some lines that I think obviously people will think are a little funny, but I think if you read the wiki, as much as I do, it really loses its charm. It's not really that funny at all because they all do this. Every single one of them does this. So, it maybe in isolation, if this was the first or second, or you don't see these things very often, this might be funny. But it just, for me, it just is completely trite. It's completely dry, totally dried up. So That's SCP-4728. We'll move on to SCP-6342. Oh man, I forgot to mention the names of these articles. Let's see. So the first one was we got the first one. The second one was a J. SCP-6508 is called Like a Fish in a Tank. That's the one with the octopus guy. And the one we just did, SCP-4728, is the title of this one is God of this Sea, at least. And of course, that being a reference to the little pond here where the talking salamander believes it is to be a god king. So there's that. This one is SCP-6342. This one's titled Man Without a Face. So that's, I think, an interesting title. Certainly the best one that we've come across today so far. So this is, as you can see, a very, very short, old pre-Sigma 9 style article. I love the classic look of this. Very, very clean, very official. It almost gives it this sort of like, hey, let's get to the real shit here. I like this quite a lot. This article, I don't want to ruin it. It's just so short that I can't really say a whole lot about it without basically guiding you through the whole thing. I think you should definitely go read this. It's absolutely a recommendation. The first recommendation that I have from this week so far. It's a really nice article. It really is a nice, interesting, creative take on that see, hear, and speak no evil sort of, shibboleth, idiom that we have in our culture. See no evils, hear no evil, and speak no evil. So it kind of takes that idea with just the right amount of character and setting put into it here. So it's punchy, it's direct, it has tones of domestic abuse, justice, patriarchal oppression, some economic commentary in there with the role of a landlord splashed in there. My only complaint is that the last line is one of these perpetual, almost omnipresent, meaningless walk off into the sunset trope style sentences for the SCP Wiki. This is what I've covered in my blog post called the whimper ending, the way to whimper your article out of existence, where the lines don't actually contribute anything, it doesn't add anything, and the endings would be so much sharper and so much more effective if you just got rid of those meaningless endings. And this is just such a sentence. Research into the significance of this is ongoing. That's pretty obvious. You shouldn't have to say that out loud. It really just pads the ending like you're watching someone walk off into the sunset in a very trite manner. So other than that, I think this is a really interesting article. Really has a lot of questions packed into it and has some very, very interesting sort of body horror imagery. So if you're a fan of that, I really think you'll get a kick out of this. It's nothing dramatic. It's sort of underneath the surface kind of stuff. It's a little bit of a pun. But it is really, really impressive and certainly stays with you a little bit. So this is SCP-6342. Let's see if we can find it. And it is definitely weightlifting the whole wiki. Definitely. This article's talent and skill is enough to counteract all these meh and below articles that we just talked about. This is a really, really good one. And then the comment section is pretty good. The author is Dr. Leonard, who we've seen before. Dr. Leonard was quite successful the last few weeks, did an article called Small Town Living that I think you might remember. It's also very much in this style. So it looks as though Dr. Leonard, is getting into sort of a niche with this, certainly sort of finding their voice in this sort of very short form, classic style approach to the aesthetic sort of thing. So I certainly thank Dr. Leonard for writing this week. This is our first good example of an article so far, and I really, really look forward to seeing what that author is going to write next. So really good work. Really, really good work. All right, so we are going to go on to the next one. This one is SCP-6643. And this one is titled The Common Denominator. And that in the middle is a question mark in parentheses. All right. So I know it seems like I am overtly negative in this cast, right? You know, there's this sort of like pseudo authority that comes along with being a critic because you believe some way there's this power dynamic where if I can criticize, ooh, I whistled. If I can criticize, I did it again. If I can criticize, there we go, your article, if I can point out things in your article that are bad, and I can show you how they're bad, that conveys a sense of superiority on my part, right? That's sort of the power dynamic between an author and a critic, or any critic and any artist who's doing their art, right? It's sort of an arms race. And the point of the point of the critique is to compensate for the product's lack of artistry. And so that's what's so satisfying about really good crit, is because at some points the crit becomes more artful than the writing, than the article, right? So that's my job. That's my task. I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to out artistry the article itself, okay? And so that does explain why I'm very critical of these articles, but at the same time, I think it's important to point out why these articles are not up to the par that I like to see articles get to. And all that to say that I can't do that with this article, okay? This article, SCP-6643, is one of the best articles I've ever read on the SCP Wiki. This is an incredibly well-written article. This is a orange ectoplasmic pseudopod manifesting during any and all containment failures relating to the process of acrobatic abatement. Yada, 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 right? So I'm just going to start this with a comment that was left in the discussion, because I think it really says everything you need to know about this article. And it's left by this individual, Savanak, here. Sometimes you read something and you just know that the author outclasses you by 1.5 miles. This is really great work. So I 100% agree with that. And I 100% get that feeling of, holy shit, I'm out of my weight, my weight class here, you know. I have no problem admitting that when I come across an article this good, right? It actually makes my job a lot easier because I don't have to point out what's bad with it, right? This is perhaps, first, let's just get into a few reasons why this article is so good. Just starting right away, this is probably the best use of a secondary class that I've seen, in that this entity, like I read, appears in and only in containment failures relating to this one, discipline of the Foundation. So because of that, you can't really call it those classical safe Euclid and Keter, right? You can't really call it Keter or Euclid because it piggybacks on the realized state that is the antithesis of those classes, right? You categorize things as Keter or Euclid in order to better contain them. Once they're uncontained, those things, they're obviously stating something about the difficulty of recontaining them or, avoiding that point to begin with. But something that piggybacks on the actual event once it's there, it feels a little not quite enough. It feels a little less than optimal to only call it something like Keter or Euclid or whatever you want to call it. So I think this is a really, really great use of secondary class, okay? It's a second-order breachable entity upon other entities breaching. So in spite of my usual displeasure and criticism for useless and bogus innovations in the form of secondary classes, I have to say that this one satisfies and is excellent. So clever. Such a clever thing. I don't know if Gleipnir is an established secondary class or if it's created in this article, but I would certainly be willing to believe that it was created for this article because it's just so well tailored to this anomaly and how it's designed. Just to gush about this article a little more, the image work I think is very evocative. It's a little discombobulating at times, with these sorts of funky neon lino cut sort of tracings going on all over the place. Just a lot of busy work with the geometry in these photos, especially when you add the color. But, it's a little discombobulating, a little vertiginous, but it's really, really well done, and is just a really, really great way to round out and tie in the article with everything. So this is just really, really good, talented image making. It looks a lot easier than it is, I'm sure, and it looks pretty good at that. So, and then let's move on. So the clinical tone of this article it's masterful, okay? It's some of the best clinical tone that I've ever seen, hands down. It gets a little too verbose at times, particularly in its use of some esoteric words. But I make that statement really for other readers because everybody hopefully knows by now that I love esoteric words, especially new ones. And so I got that in this article. So just to let myself geek out, this was a word I didn't know. Gantries, these things that like overhead structure that people can get onto. I didn't know that word, so I like that. And I even had to look up achromatic abatement. Achromatic is one of the coolest words that has ever existed, ever. It means told orally to chosen disciples only. So it's kind of a variant of a specified variant of esoteric. So it's just, this was a delight to read, and it really brought out the search engines. And another thing that it brought out the search engine for is this thing that's mentioned here called carcinization. Of course, carcin is the prefix, I think it's Latin, meaning crab. Like, I don't know if you know this, but like something that gives you cancer is a carcinogen. And that carcin is, it shares the same prefix as crab. And the reason that they initially called cancers crabs is because obviously Cancer, the crab, I guess, is a constellation or something. But anyway, so if we look it up, carcinization is an example of convergent evolution in which a crustacean evolves into a crab-like form from a non-crab-like form. And so people have kind of taken this and ran with it, saying that humans over time have become more like crabs with their no tail and their grippy hands from their ancestor mammals. But it seems as though this is really supposed to only be applicable to crustaceans. But then, of course, there's this, which is an XKCD cartoon about it. And I just thought that was a nice thing to see while I looked this up, because I really think that this author, who we'll get to who the author is, you might already know. This author is sort of that XKCD of the SCP Wiki, in my opinion. Just like, just criminally witty, very, very sharp, and kind of, enjoyably so at the same time. So anyway, there's just some great words in this. I really appreciate those words. I got that fix from this article, which is very, very rare. I can remember the last time it happened even. It's been about 3 weeks, and the last time it happened was with Assertive Roland, their article about ritualistic paraphernalia. So it doesn't happen very often. It happens, once in a blue moon for me. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm just trying to tell you that these people are really, really good at what they're doing. So anyway, the clinical tone, like I said, is way past the threshold ascription of expert. Way past it. It's phenomenal. It's miraculous clinical tone. And then on top of that, there are so many moments of shimmering brilliance just shedding off of the prose effortlessly. Just beautiful little shapes and kernels of ideas. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. So this one, this line right here, this theory received the dubious honor of falsification, the only such case on record. So, I mean, I think there's one person who bashes that statement in the comment section, but what's really, really very clever about this is that, it's very, very hard to falsify something, right? From a philosophical and epistemological standpoint, like, you really can only falsify things in really, really, really established sciences, and even then it's sort of asymptotic. You can falsify things in theoretics like math, and really, really hard logic systems like that, but it's very rare that you get to falsify something. You can basically just get it to the point of virtual falsification, that it's the chances of it not being false are so low that you can basically say it's false. That's really what science is, right? It doesn't actually know that something is false, ever. The only way you can prove anything is in math or in formal logic. And so that's just a really nice observation from this author. This is the kind of subtlety that, if played right, can bring out these beautiful flowering moments of thought like this in this article. There's another one actually very close by. The article has this sort of fluidity, this seamless fluidity between these complex scenarios, one after the other. So, like, for example, the Foundation's largest esoteric waste refinery. Like, whoa, dude! Like, that's how you come out swinging with an idea. You just blow past it like it's no big thing, but then it's got like there's so much density packed into that. And it just flies past so quick. It's like, it's like a plane flying right past you or something like that. You're just like, what the fuck was that? I don't know, but it was very complicated, very impressive. So this ability that I'm talking about here to sort of just casually drop, pretty incredible secondary, almost peripheral and tangential inclusions is most thoroughly concentrated in this list down here of proposed theories on the origin of what this anomaly might be or might be doing. The quality of the imagination and the exquisiteness, the resplendence of the thought content all over this article is just off the charts, completely off the charts. This is probably one of the smartest articles I've ever read. I love how it takes a very academic approach to itself, as opposed to turning into the incredibly zany or action-centric directional choices that could have been here. There's a lot of great questions that this article sets up, and I'm very happy that the author gave those questions the considerations that they deserve. And then it doesn't answer those questions, and that's another thing that I like about this anomaly in this article, is that it's used to observe a more fundamental quality of writing, both on the SCP and everywhere else. And it's why really the rule of show, don't tell is a rule, that ultimately whatever the answer is to the questions that are raised will ultimately result in disappointment. The author does a great job of couching this thought into the characters that are here, as opposed to it being this very blatantly sort of put bully pulpit for the author to just sort of preach from, which ironically we saw from this author's last article, which was a Totley and Vikander Need mashup that was just ridiculously preachy in its partisanship, politically speaking. But yeah, so I mean, it's a little bit of a nihilistic approach in the philosophy of not answering these questions intentionally, and that sort of being the answer. So it's just a very, very deep, very dense article. So I knew very early on that this was written by Harry Blank. Okay. Not only does he sort of force such a recognition with the pet canons that he has and the style of imagery that he usually includes in these sorts of documents. So there are some pretty obvious and clear tells that this is this author early into the work and all throughout it, but it honestly doesn't matter. You could literally just have the prose here, and it's so matured, it's so advanced that I think it would have been obvious anyway that this is probably Harry Blank. So this may be something that's odd for people to hear. I usually don't speak well of Harry Blank. I don't like Harry Blank as a person, particularly, just from the things that I've seen them say and do. For example, their involvement in the ES incident, with the Spanish branch of the wiki. I thought that was quite shameful. And I think spoke volumes about, unfortunately, his character. But this is a writing site. All that stuff is extracurricular. If it's not, excuse me, if it's not like totally egregious, like something that Dr. Bright did, I'm willing to look past those things because you write so damn well. And I mean, if I was running the site, maybe that would be different, but I'm not. I'm just reading your works. So, Yeah, this is just an absolute celebration in my mind of an article. It's just so damn good. It almost makes you mad how good it is, honestly. So for me, Harry Blank sort of represents these dipoles of the wiki. So on the one hand, he's an astoundingly good writer, an intimidating thinker, and a clear master of the craft, right? On the other hand, he fritters away his talent that we see here and ability on punning verbose lines that have a clear design to appeal to people less than half his age. So, I mean, this article right here, SCP-6643, is the raw power and potential of someone like Harry Blank, who has the benefit of being, I know, a little older than most people on the wiki, but this is that life maturity, that life lesson, that chronic dedication to a craft that just comes through so fluently that it can't be from anything other than just a mastery of something spread out over a long number of years. So this is the raw power and potential of someone like Harry Blank. It's a right shame. I think that's a very good argument for really getting very angry at Harry Blank when he decides to basically use his talents to write Kids Bop articles. It's like sitting down with the most sophisticated guitar you can possibly own and someone just playing hot cross buns on it over and over on one string. All we have to do is look at his last article for an example of that. It doesn't really have the finesse of this one. That old one was sort of like a political sledgehammer to the face. This one is just absolutely a triumph of finesse, in my opinion. So really a nice air of mystery, but such a savoring, unusual savoring of the non-cadence that mystery still has by the end of this article. And it's a unique article that deserves every upvote that I think it will get. So there's really good commentary in here. A lot of it is just praise, honestly. But I wish Harry Blank I wish Harry Blank decided to be this good every time. That's what I wish. But there's different strokes for different folks. Obviously, Harry Blank is interested in more than just writing to his potential. He wants to do other things too, including messing around. And we can't fault him too much for that. So, but yeah, you're not going to find an article written better than this. It doesn't get better than this. This maybe doesn't have the bombast of something like, a cactus or a rounder house or something like that. Doesn't have the nice mix of mimetic appeal and technicality that you'd get out of a Tanhoney. It doesn't have the sort of grandiloquent narrativic sort of embellishments that you would get with a Tufto. But this is a technical masterpiece. I mean, the flow, the structure, the directionality, the design of the anomaly, how it's treated, how it's resolved in a way that isn't really resolved. I'm going to try to stop gushing. I could go on forever, I think, about this article. This is a really, really, really good article. It's a little difficult to read. Obviously, the intelligence quotient on this article is quite high. So, I mean, in some cases that will act as a detriment, I think, although it has been very well received, as you can see, in the few days that it's been up. But yeah, there are certainly moments in here that this article is not for everybody. There are moments in here where the read is very difficult to get through. Don't feel insecure or overwhelmed, or singled out if it's tough to read through this article. I think that most people will have a tough time reading through portions of this article because it just doesn't make a lot of compromises with readability at times, and I think that's really what I'm so impressed with, honestly. To just see this raw energy, this raw horsepower coming out of this engine. It's impressive. It's impressive. I don't want to leave this article. I don't know if you can tell that. I just don't want to leave. How long have we been doing this? An hour? So let's see. How far are we? So we got this. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sheesh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's do one more, and then we'll take a little break. I like to take a little intermission. Take a break, chug some water, reset. Did I rank that one? I didn't. So this one, SCP 6643, definitely weightlifting the whole of the wiki. Oh my gosh, it's not even close. This is such a good article. Holy shit. By the way, people that I think place your bets. Who's going to win the 7K? Okay. My dark horse candidate for winning the SCP, and this is just kind of, trying to surmise, sort of process a lot of different elements. Who's on a roll lately? Who's really hit their stride? Who I think has the potential to work well with the theme? Things like this. I would love to see Harry Blank win SCP-7000. Honestly, I would, because he's that good of a writer. I don't think it would be good for his ego, which surely you would at that point need to butter in order to enter and exit any room, just to get the head through the door. But, once again, this is about writing, so I think Harry Blank would be a good winner, a good candidate to win SCP-7000. I think he's primed for that pretty well. But my dark horse choice, I think would be so interesting to see this, wouldn't it? Would be if Dr. Sumerian won, right? Because Dr. Sumerian has been banned from contests for like years, and he finally got back like in, what was it, last few months or something like that. I think this is the first contest that has come around since Sumerian has been, the ban has been lifted. So I just thought that would be funny, dark horse sort of, haha, wouldn't that be something? He is writing an article for the 7K about D&D, so I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if you can win the 7K with an article about D&D. I don't think he cares, but anyway, there's that. All right, so I'll go ahead and tell you that's the best article that I read this week by far. That's not to say there aren't really good articles left, so we'll get into some really good ones. I love sitting in a really good article. Believe it or not, I don't like reading bad articles. So it's a lot of work I have to, that I have to do to communicate how bad a bad article is. But really good articles are miraculous. They often escape words in ways. So anyways, we'll move on. SCP-6509. This is another excellent article. In fact, SCP-6509 is, where is it? Oh man, did I not do this one? Here it is. It's also weightlifting the whole SCP Wiki. So we've had some really good ones in a row. Is that right? Oh my gosh. So yeah, 6342, 6643, 6509. Holy crap. We got 3 weightlifting the whole SCPs in a row. Wow. I hadn't realized that. That's pretty great. This one is an excellent article. And once again, it's pretty short, so I don't want to go too much into it. I'll basically I might as well just read the whole thing, right, if I talk that much about it. But this is an interesting anomaly. It uses a bit of technobabble to kind of get through its effect. We see things like hyperreal and high energy surrounding Hume field, stuff like this. It's a serviceable anomaly. Basically what it is an assortment of rifle bullets possessing an abnormal resistance to the effects of retrocausal or reality structuring events. So what that basically means is that it's allowed to persist through even highly extensive shifts in local spacetime. So it's basically immune or resistant to reality bending, which you can already sort of start to piece together the utility of, right? If you can shoot a reality bender, this would be the bullet to do it with, right? So the intrigue of this comes from the manner of the anomaly's discovery, and the author sort of clues in the reader very tactfully and leaves drops for the reader just here and there. There's a lot of subtlety in the detail that achieves this. For example, let's take a look at this this line right here. That's a good example. That's not the line. Most recovered instances display striations consistent with having been previously fired from a rifle. So I guess you have to know a little bit about guns here, but there's a bullet, there's its casing. The bullet goes through the rifle. The word rifle means that barrel that it goes through is actually twisted. It's got indentions in it that sort of catch the bullet as it's moving through the barrel, and it spirals. If you've ever seen James Bond intro, this little thing right here that everybody's seen. So that's looking down the barrel of a gun, obviously, and the reason why you have these swirls is because that's called rifling. So that when the bullet goes through it, it actually gives the bullet spin, right? It doesn't just send it through the barrel. It catches those rivets that you see here inside the barrel, and it spins the bullet, and that gives it more gyrational stability and translating to better ballistics and more accuracy, okay? So what this statement is saying is that most recovered instances display striations, which are the marks left by those rifling curves, striations consistent with having been previously fired from a rifle. So what that also means is that the individual firing these bullets went and retrieved the bullets after they were shot, indicating that they don't really want these things to be found. And also we can imagine how painstaking it might have been to retrieve spent bullets. It sounds incredibly difficult and time-consuming, but that's just the sort of dedication, it seems, that the people behind this anomaly want to keep it under wraps with. So that's pretty cool. So we're introduced to a humanoid, its anomalous characteristics, which really spike up the intrigue, such as the vocal cords having been surgically severed. Of course, that sort of indicating a form of data security. You know, cut the vocal cords; they can't spill or become a rat for anything. So, short as this article is, we also get some lore building in here that has the potential to be built upon, particularly this United States Occult Military Division pentagram. That's kind of cool. I don't know if that's already a thing, but it seems like a great direction to go into. So, yeah, I mean, all in all, this is a laser-focused article, a very thought-provoking puzzle style of ominous short form, and it hits that note of being nebulous enough to be leading, but solid enough to grip. It's very procedural. It doesn't waste its breath or time. It moves at a very brisk beats per minute to some very interesting moments. The article's real weight, I think, is actually unspoken, as if it's filled with dark matter that's just insinuated as possibility. And so it's nice to see articles do that really, really well. There are some deep time and reality bending processes implied here that we only, in the current state of this article as presented, see the iceberg tip of. Also, I love it when authors give us both sides like this. So if you go into the discussion, obviously this is the mystery on this is turned up to about 10 or 11, and but I do love it. I do love it, but I also love it when the author will come in and also kind of explain this too. So there's a little bit of a spoiler section here. And I'm just now reading this. This seems to be a new comment for me. Tacking this is rewritable. I think it's a strong concept for horror, but someone other than me should definitely do it better, especially given that most of the downvotes on it come from more experienced authors than me. So basically, this is a new author. It's not a brand new author. This is the third article for this author. And unfortunately, this author has paid too much attention, as we can tell from this new comment here, paid too much attention to the reception as it relates to other authors. So what essentially this author is doing is paying too much attention to who voted on their page. And we can see that it has absolutely obliterated this individual's faith in their own article and also confidence. So you can go down and look who rated your page. I really don't think you should be doing that to yourself. Obviously, this is not anything that you need to know. It has the potential to brew grudges. This is how most people in the SCP Wiki operate, is if they see you downvoting your article, and they most all the time look, they will develop grudges against you. But in addition to that, I don't know if you can say that people better than you are downvoting this. I mean, you have someone like Ekranak, who's excellent, Dr. Leonard, who we just saw an excellent article from as well. Bread Tyrant is really, really good. Yeah, so I mean, I'm not really sure who he could possibly be talking about here. Morhadow? I don't really, honestly. Roofhouse? There's not many downvotes here at all. In fact, I think those are there's only 3, and I don't think Dr. Yurko is anybody that I know, I mean, personally. That's a very strange comment and an unfortunate comment left by the author here. I really wish that they would watch this. In fact, I might send this to them. Not that my opinion matters too much. I'm sure that they wouldn't put me in the same category as these people who are influencing the author to be so dejected with their own work. But I think this is clearly one of the better articles of this week, and certainly deserves to be in the weightlifting category of the SCP Wiki. There is one little detail that I thought was a little odd in this article that I would like to point out, is that basically at the end here, you see the subject was dead by a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. And so, obviously there's a sniper rifle. It's very clear why that might be there for this person who I guess is an anomalous assassin. Obviously they use a sniper rifle to, use these bullets. And then I think the M911, of course, a 911 is a very classic pistol, handgun. I think the M911 is there in order for the anomalous assassin to shoot themselves in the head, because it's a little hard to imagine somebody shooting themselves in the head with a sniper rifle. So I think that's why this M911 pistol is here. But at the same time, this is an assortment of rifle bullets. So I don't know if that means that. I'm assuming that the bullet that this person shot themselves with is a non-anomalous bullet, because it would not work to shoot a rifle bullet in through a 911. So, but we can just ignore that. I'm pretty sure we have the ability and freedom to read into this as being just a normal bullet that does its job perfectly well without having to be anomalous. Anyways, so that's a real shame to see the author has a vote of no confidence in their own work. That was a really, really excellent article. Okay, so we are about 1 hour and 30 minutes. I think we're making pretty good time here. I think we'll probably hit the maybe 2 hour 30, 2 hour 45 mark before we're done with this. But as I usually do, we are going to take a little bit of an intermission. So this will be about 10 minutes. So it is on the hour here for me as it is for you. So I'll be back around 10 after the hour. Go have a potty break, get something to drink, have a snack, read a very short SCP that we have yet to talk about so that you can have your own thoughts about it before I give you mine. But I will be back in about 10 minutes, and I will see you then. Okay, we back. What's going on? It's me. I just got a Coke. You know what I'm saying? This kind of Coke, guys. What's up? All right, so we are back. Hope you enjoyed your intermission. I certainly enjoyed mine. That was nice. Stepped outside, got a little fresh air. That was nice. Let's pick up right where we left off. So we were just looking at SCP-6509. I forgot to tell you the name of that. That one is Bullet Time, which is, you know, a pretty clever name. Okay, I get it. So good for you. The next one is SCP-6253. Let me scroll down here to get a quick look at this guy. SCP-6253. What is this one called? Let me look at my notes before I forget. SCP-6253, the title is Error 404, Limbs Not Found. Which is excellent because it uses 5 words. That's kind of like, I love that shit, you know. But that's a great title, Error 404, Limbs Not Found. I kind of like that. So, SCP-6253. Okay, so this is the collective designation for several pieces of software, yada, 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 when installed on cybernetic implants meant for human brain-machine interfaces. It provides support and defense against threats, both mundane and anomalous. Okay, that was a heck of a sentence to try to read, and I even truncated it just a little bit there. So obviously, that's a lot to read. That's kind of a tough sentence. Probably could be worked on quite a little bit. BMI for me is a little weird because it stands for Body Mass Index, but that's just me. Don't worry about that. So yeah, the article basically goes into this. It's a really interesting article talking about sort of the dynamics between the Foundation and the Church of Maxwellism. A member comes and basically represents that GOI to the Foundation so that they can kind of do a joint venture together to release this software. I guess it's basically anomalous because it was created by a GOI. That's kind of a strange reason to automatically designate something anomalous. They don't necessarily have to be making something anomalous. But that's what happens here. And then it apparently protects against anomalous hazards, so I guess it itself is anomalous. I'm not really sure. But anyway, so the name of the game here is that data security makes for strange bedfellows, right? So basically these two groups, the Foundation and the Church of Maxwell-ism, typically wouldn't be operating together, but in this article it does. And so it's a Thaumiel. they're trying to sort of distribute this, and so they kind of have to work together. Are you in Rashid's D&D group? No, Rajesh is my brother, and this was like the code phrase to confirm the identity. So that's pretty cool. There's something very odd that happens in this article. We've already seen it once. This phrase, mundane and anomalous. Defense against threats, both mundane and anomalous. It's really the same sort of verbiage that we see in sort of like an oath to the army, like protecting, or the oath to the Constitution or something like that, protecting the Constitution from enemies, both domestic and foreign and domestic, whatever. And so very strangely, this phrase appears several times in the article. We already saw it once. Here it is again in a dialogue. There it is again in an 05 vote summary. So it's just a little weird that this phrase appears several times, in different places in the documentation, formally in a character's discussion with another character, and it sort of takes away the read in a way. It's kind of odd that the in-universe character and the documentation and an 05 vote synopsis would use the same irreducible phrase. It feels like a moment where the author sort of loses the grip on what they are writing and who they are writing in a given moment, and indicates to me, that the author probably doesn't realize that this has shown up so many times in so many different places in what should be so many different voices. So that was something that kind of took me out of the read the whole way through. I'm not really sure. The dialogue here from the first addendum, which is basically how this article gets kickstarted and gets going, it reads more like an interview than an actual dialogue. It sort of feels like a conversational badminton game happening between the characters where, your turn to talk is sort of just volleyed back and forth, sort of floatingly and unexcitingly throughout the whole thing. It seems like a lot of an exposition dump for the sake of building the anomaly, which means that most of the potential intrigue here is just in this exposition, if anywhere, and in my opinion just isn't really there at all. And then there's also some unfortunate, very fundamental grammar errors. Actually, they fixed this one. This sentence used to start with a lowercase, so it's nice to see that they fixed that. So this is a highly technical article, really deals a lot in code. It feels like it was written by somebody heavily involved in the field of data security or coding, perhaps professionally, and then decided to make an SCP out of that expertise. So in this way, the appeal of this article is very specific and very specialized. A lot of this is going to sound like technobabble in ways. I think it's fine to interject expertise into SCP articles. In fact, I've long been a proponent of that, but just with the caveat that it has to come in small doses. You can't really, in my opinion, make an entire article about specialized expertise and have that good effect happen, which is typically just it being a garnish that sort of brightens the read slightly. But in this way, really the whole thing is really, really deeply embedded in the professional sort of nuance of coding, in my opinion. We even get like bug reports here. There is the limbs not found, though, so that's nice. With sort of like patch note updates, it's just very, very technical. This section about version update patch notes, I think it's a nice comparison for where I put the readability and enjoyability of this article on. So, this was a difficult article to get through. It was filled with just a lot of, in my opinion, a lot of bloat that didn't need to be there. I felt like the author was trying too hard to come off as a professional in this area, and it just never really rose to the level of interest to me. So I got a decent way through this. I was having a pretty hard time. It's not badly written by any means. The clinical tone is good, but it's just not very engaging. Clinical tone is really the minimum that you have to have a good article, in my opinion. You can have good articles despite clinical tone, as Harmony will tell you as well. But for me, it's like it doesn't really make an article good. It's just great that you did it well, but it doesn't make an article good. It's like saying, it's like saying that your engine's exhaust tubing is really nicely welded together. I mean, that's great, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the engine moving, or going. So I didn't finish this article. For what it's worth, there is a lot of praise in the comments, so that's useful to see, I think, in my opinion. There's a lot of praise in there. There are also some really good analysis. This Cosmic Overthinker does really good. They make some good points about the inclusion of Elon Musk. This article is just entrepreneurially very involved in the capitalistic sort of incentives and efforts of Elon Musk, and so it's a little bit topical, and I like what this individual has to say. I normally don't care too much for the inclusion of real-world, current living public figures. This reader does like how that was handled, though, so that's nice to see. I think this is... I can't say that this article is so bad that I didn't finish it. I just didn't finish it because there was nothing really bad about it. That's the odd thing. Typically, I would count the fact that I can't finish the article as a negative, as a bad thing. But that's really just not the case. It's very strange and a unique case, in my opinion. The article was not bad. It, I think, was just way too long for the level of intrigue that it was okay operating on for me. So for that reason, I'm going to do something a little different, a little new. Here it is, SCP-6253. I'm just going to abstain from categorizing it, okay? Because I didn't finish it. Technically, I didn't finish it, but I didn't finish it not because, how do I say this in English? The reason I didn't finish it was not because it was really, really bad. It was kind of boring, it was kind of... So I guess I'll put it in there just because I technically didn't finish it, and we're splitting hairs on bad and boring. But I think, honestly, this article has the potential to be, meh, just depending on how you read it. I would certainly carve out a good 30 minutes for this article. It certainly is a pretty long article. So, I mean, for what it's worth, the people who did finish it seem to like it. I hate it, but it just didn't really hit it off for me, and so I couldn't justify the usage of my time, unfortunately, with this one. So, but the name is excellent. Error 404. What is it? Error 404. Limbs not found. That's pretty good. Okay, SCP-6612. This one is probably the most interesting one that we'll look at tonight. This one is called Horse Joke. So you may already sort of be getting the vibe of this article, right? I'm just going to leave it on the screen for a second. You could just look at it, I guess. So this is a really controversial article, right? It's got like 46 comments, and the upvote count is at 22. Not that I care too much about these things. I just think that's a nice indication that this is a highly controversial article. It's very discussed, more so than it is upvoted. So yeah, what's going on here? I mean, we might as well just take an entire look at this thing. It's so bite-sized that you can't really divide it. You can't really quantify this in any way. You have to take it all or nothing. Sort of an action potential of an article, very quick, very electrifying, very galvanizing, and polarizing for a lot of people. So this is a neutralized anomaly. It never really got past the pending phase, and then it kind of petered out there. So it's housed in a stable, so it's a horse. It needs to be cleaned and fed daily. That's awesome. It's an adult red roan horse capable of human speech. How the entity does this is currently unknown. Further research is ongoing. Now, I'll point out that this is obviously one of the instances of what we would call a whimper ending, but it's not at the ending. So I think this is fine given the sparsity of this report. I think it's okay to include that here. Situationally, just because there's so little going on here, it's like, okay, hey, we know this is not much, but we are working on it. And so the addendum is basically all we get. A researcher comes up to the horse, and of course, the horse can talk, and so they say, hi, so you can talk, and then the horse says, you heard it straight from the horse's mouth. and then there's this sort of like comedic pause, and then the horse says this was a mistake. So I think on the face of it, this has everything that I typically would be just biting, to criticize, right? Just dying to get at this thing to criticize it, right? I mean, it's a talking animal, right? It's just insultingly short. It's insultingly thin. And then the whole thing is very clearly an excuse to deliver a one-liner pun. So you might think that I think this article is terrible. And there's a lot of people who do. If you look at the comments here, there's a lot of people who really don't like this article. There's a lot of people who think this article is excellent. Okay. I think this article is pretty good. And I'll tell you why. Because it doesn't seem like I would be the kind of person to like this article. And you're right. But there's a few subtle things that it does that I think elevates it to the point of being good. So this is SCP-6612. And we're going to put it in the Ray of Hope category, okay? It's a Ray of Hope for a couple of reasons. First of all, even though it basically does this by being really short and very brief and succinct, it is a talking animal article that I don't hate, that doesn't do any of those trite, formulaic things that we saw in the talking salamander article from this week do, and that every other talking animal article on the SCP Wiki does. So it doesn't do any of those. And so it's got that going for it, okay? Sometimes it's just about not making the mistakes. So there was something very interesting about this article. The object class at one point had a footnote on it that tagged it as serio-comical. And I'm just going to type this out so you see what I'm talking about. Serio-comical. Serio-comical. Which was, to me, like the worst possible move that you could do with this SCP. So it's obviously trying to ride this. It's sort of taking notes from something like a Neo-Lol Foundation approach where it's only existing so that it can make a stupid joke, right? That's really what Neo-Lol Foundation is. But it doesn't classify it with a -J. That's what Neo-Lol Foundation is, by the way. It's a joke article. It's a joke of an article that the author, for some reason, decides they're not going to put a -J with. That's what Neo-Lol Foundation is. So very clearly, this sort of falls into that category, right? It tries to do it. There's a couple of ways in which I think it avoids that. First of all, at no point in this very, very short article is the Foundation rendered as incompetent. The author is not making compromises with the writing premise and the genre itself in order to enact the joke. So it avoids being Neo-Lol Foundation that way. And it typically would be very frustrating to see this not tagged with a J, or this something that is just so low effort as this, attempting to pass off, basically writing all of its weight on the very flimsy peg of a structure, stilt-like structure of this one little pun that doesn't really... I'm not sure that it makes people laugh, honestly. Maybe it does. But anyways, so a long story short is that object class, that serio-comical object class that sort of was the author's way of sort of trying to play both worlds at the same time, trying to have the cake and eat it too kind of thing, where they were so insecure about the fact that this was not a J that they tried to introduce a footnoted object class in a secondary fashion, calling it serio-comical, which is just ridiculously dumb. So I was happy to see that the author removed that. I really think that if that had stayed, this article would be a mistake. But because the author removed it, I think it's now set exactly where it needs to be. So it's nice to see that sense prevailed in this case. The wiki won for this day. Having said that, I think this is a very talented example of humor mixing with the staunch in-universe character of the Foundation. Once again, nothing done on the part of the Foundation is ridiculous, unbelievable, or even incompetent for the sake of the author's love of idiocy. There are no compromises being made with stupidity in order to undermine character by making a joke, which once again is sort of a defining quality of Neo-Lol Foundation. So instead, it conveys what amounts to a... turn this down. I don't think I can. It conveys what amounts to a very sort of curious but pretty funny situation. I mean, there really isn't the need for a lot in this article with it being neutralized. You're not really supposed to have a lot of information in a neutralized article. There's no real point. Given that the Foundation is supposed to be an actionable thing, it's not really interested in stories around the campfire. So neutralized anomalies should probably have not a lot of documentation, especially if they never really got out of the pending categories. So this article is making a lot of internal sense with its logic, which I think is how its joke works. Once again, you know, if you deviate from that and go just whole hog onto the joke such that you are neglecting certain components of the writing style and the genre, that's when you've made a grave error. But this article actually doesn't do that. And I think, honestly, the only reason it doesn't is because it's just so short. I think if the author gave themselves more length here, they would have given themselves more rope to hang themselves with, so to speak. 1 second, excuse me. Okay, there you go. Just a little too loud. So, whether this is talent that has avoided these common pitfalls, or just the fact that it's just tactfully cut short and thereby minimizing the surface area in which it can have a mistake, I don't know. That's, I guess, your call. So anyway, it's not Neo-Lol Foundation. That's nice to see. The joy of this article lies in what the implications make true for the Foundation beyond this article. They know that this horse is anomalous, right? But it just doesn't want to talk anymore. So the reason why I haven't finished reading this article is because I think the rest of this article is why this article is a good one. If this article had ended right here at the joke, which I think most people would do, and certainly the paragons of Neo-Lol Foundation would do. We saw this actually a few weeks ago. I think it was last week, or maybe the week before, with the Horse Jesus article, Who Dived for Your Sins. I mean, you know, that sort of author would cut this article off right here, right? This author decides to have the horse realize this was a mistake, back away, and then the addendum says the SCP hasn't spoken again since the initial interview and has displayed no further attempts to do so. It's been reclassified as neutralized and remains in this stable. That ending, it doesn't seem like it adds a lot, but I think it's really, it makes all the difference in the world. Because what we are left with is this really funny situation of implications where the Foundation knows that this thing is anomalous. They know it can talk, but it just doesn't want to talk anymore, and so it doesn't. I'm also glad that the author decided that they weren't going to torture this animal in order to get its anomalous qualities out, such like the case that we saw with Senior Pig, an article by Testaffer a few weeks ago. So the article, once again, like I said, clearly exists to solely deliver a situational pun where the horse is saying you've heard it straight from the horse's mouth. It is a bit juvenile. It is a bit cringe. The would-be zaniness of this immediately stops there, and the horse decides to not talk again. That's what makes this have extra layers of enjoyment and connectivity, because we have all been in that place where we've gone into a place and a situation, and then we almost instantaneously recognize that it was a bad decision. It's a lot like the Ron Burgundy quote, when he jumped down into the bear pit at the zoo to save his friends, and he was like, I immediately regret this decision. That's the Ron Burgundy moment that this article sort of has some kinship with, and I think we've all felt that before, whether it's like, hey, I'm going to go into this bar, I'm going to go into this dive bar, and you open the door and you're like, holy shit, this was a mistake. So that's really just this same thing happening, but from the receiving end of that interaction, and that interaction being enacted by the horse. So it's almost like a glimpse of a person that you get walking past them on the sidewalk, and that's all you get. It's just a little glimpse. There's so much unspoken there, and you're forced to move on with your life, and you'll never see that person ever again, probably. That's kind of like what this article is. And there's this sort of like vague, like like strangely powerful sense of loss in this that wafts up from the very last addendum here that you wouldn't get if you amateurishly ended it at this pun. And you can see how these individuals who are guiding the wiki in this we don't have to use a -J thing philosophy, are just just bad writers when they're doing this, is because the actual content after this joke is what makes this article way better, than what it would be if we literally ended it right after the joke here. So, I think it's a really, really interesting article. It's a social experiment without intending to be a social experiment. We're going to look at the comments because they're just way too interesting to not look at. But this is a really wild, a really muscular, a really stoic article that somehow achieves equal parts progressive stances currently on the wiki and a conservatism of the older site. So I gotta applaud that. That's well done. I'm not sure how that happened, but it did. Like I said, it's a very galvanizing article. I happen to come down on the enjoying side of this one for the reasons discussed. I honestly think the whole assessment would have turned on the use of that serio-comical footnote. It would probably be a bad thing for me if that stayed up. So, and just one other thing to say about this article: its length, its brevity, how short it is, and just the seemingly lack of content that's in this. But if you think about it a little deeper, one step further, where else can you really go with this article? In universe, in character for the Foundation, this article actually makes total sense. I mean, there's got to be an anomaly somewhere that we know is deeper than what it volitionally wants to present to us, and then barely lets us in on that secret, but then backs away to where there's no more progress possible, right? No more progress can be made. That has to exist somewhere in some fashion, and so this is where that exists. So, I mean, where else can it go? You sort of have to cut it off there. I mean, you could have cut it off earlier, of course, but, this is a fine place to cut it off, in my opinion. So this is a pretty geometric article. I mean, it's very clean. It's very simple. It's almost too simple, but it's a very interesting geometry. It's just a beautiful little shape of an article. So this is 6621, and I already put it there, A Ray of Hope. So yeah, I think that's a good place for this. Okay, so like I said, very, very entertaining comment section. Very, very entertaining comment section. We have a lot of people saying this would work better as a J, which I want to agree with, because I usually am on that side of the fence for sure. But once again, the situation is funny, but the Foundation isn't like being goofy. Other people say this elsewhere, but you are allowed to be funny, right? People think that I'm against being funny on main, and that's not true. You can be funny on main. This is a good example of it. It's just that you can't compromise the Foundation's character in order to make your stupid joke. And this article doesn't do that, so it's fine. We have a lot of humor on the wiki, surely. So it's a very entertaining comment section. There's a nice quote here, a nice comment from Hollow Asolfo, who basically goes into some very wax poetic sort of literary analysis on this article. It's funny to read. And Dariel Halo has my sort of take by saying, nah, this is perfect, exactly what an SCP should be, completely and totally inexplicable thing that in order to possibly explain would require basically killing it and thus destroying it in the process. On the next page, I thought this was so funny. Plague PJP, who is like Neo-Law Foundation to the bone, right? If this cut off right after you heard it straight from the horse's mouth, I would have upvoted this. And then you got one person saying, really? That would have been a definite downvote for me. The horse going, this is a mistake, is way funnier, which I agree with. I think it's just hilarious to see this comment from Plague PJP at this moment, because it really helpfully displays why Neo-Law Foundation is a mistake. Okay, why it's a bad compositional move. And how this article, SCP-6612, is an improvement on what Plague PJP would be doing here. So if you ended the article on this horse's mouth line, you would have squarely placed the article on the joke, whereas right now, as it stands, it's a little off-center from the joke because it has some extra content after it. So you would have placed the center of gravity of the article directly on the joke. reducing really the article to a delivery system for the joke, in the same way that a balloon can be filled with piss. But Plague PJP doesn't understand that. They just see the joke and they think, oh, the joke has been made, so we're done here, right? Going past the joke, is what makes this article better than any of those other Neo-Law Foundation joke attempts, right? I mean, think of something like the diving horse. It gets its joke in and then it leaves because that's all it's there for. This one, it does a few other things, and it's so short, it's probably 10-20% of the article that follows the joke, honestly, right? So it's that added little bit in universe, that part of the Foundation that's like, well, we really know that this is anomalous, but what are we going to do? Like, what the hell are we going to do? We can't force the horse to talk, It's really quite an interesting spin on the joke. I mean, it's just a totally different dimensionality to the joke. So I totally agree with Crowcat. I think Plague PJP is exposing their lack of sophistication when it comes to writing, particularly in this style that is solely meant to be essentially a delivery mechanism for a bad joke, for a dad joke, and a dad joke and a bad joke. Once again, you really should go read this. Crowcat has a really good comment on their own. I feel conflicted. It has that jokey vibe inherent to Jay's and is structured like one, but it also doesn't act super jokey or non-clinical. And that's my point. That's my point. It does a really, really good job of writing that line. The Neo-Law Foundation folks have just been outclassed. This author did a better job than they can do. This person, no votes. Western says, the pun is cute, but one singular pun doesn't really make for an enjoyable SCP unless it's an extremely good pun. So I wonder if he dived for your sins counts as an extremely good pun, because these two things are very similar, right? I mean, they're both horses, right? Who are really only there for a joke. And then a couple other comments that I thought were worth pointing out, probably pretty interesting. Fabled Tiefling here says, I hate the needs to be a J feedback since funny article doesn't innately mean something needs to be a J. That said, I actually agree with it here. The article is largely devoid of any real content aside from the joke. The entire thing is a setup for the punchline. That's really all that there is here. So I don't think that a Fabled Tiefling doesn't really understand what makes a -J. It isn't the fact that it's humorous, right? It's what makes something a -J is the breaking of the characterization of the Foundation for the sake of being funny, right? Mostly. Neo-Law Foundation, once again, literally is the refusal to add a -J onto articles that do this. So it would be interesting. I don't know Fabled Tiefling's voting history. I don't really want to know. I don't care. But it would be interesting to go see if they felt the same about all the other articles that do this. All the Neo-Law Foundation joke articles. The metric ton of them that now plague the wiki. So anyway, the same with Abranth. Abranth has a good comment here. Or sorry, Abreth. I agree with Fable in the fact that a funny article isn't necessarily a J. This isn't productive or constructive feedback in my opinion. Otherwise, I found the article funny. It's short. Yeah, the joke may not be that funny by the end of the day, but it's just hilarious to me. The horse assuming that this was a mistake implies how it had been planning to make that pun all along. And that's an excellent observation that once again adds a little more sophistication to this. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of it here on this article. Maybe we're doing a large favor reading into this so much. But I really do think that this article is actually more well-written than just your... there's more here than just your typical, I exist only for the joke thing, whether intentionally by the author or incidentally. I think it's just very subtle. Not a lot of people are able to pick up on that. Let's see. What else can we see here? What else? Anyway, there's a lot of really good... There's a lot of really good stuff here. I think Flops does an excellent job saying this. I think, once again, Flops is probably missing the same thing that Fabled and Abreth do, but puts the issue about that serio-comic footnote that I talked about absolutely perfectly. So let's read that part. Having said that, I also think it's eye-rolling that this article has used Seriocomic to position itself as both a main list and a joke. I've read and voted on this before you made that footnote, but if you were to come at this from the perspective of someone expecting your standard SCP article, I fail to see how it helps. It feels like you, the author, has seen the controversial reception of your article and then tried to change course by prefacing it with, "I know this is silly, so feel free to consider this a legitimate joke, depending upon your takeaway." And the TLDR is that you can't have your cake and eat it too. This is just an excellent comment, and I wanted to bring it out because, ironically, this is the same timid and sort of vote-conscious sort of, what did she say? Change course. Yeah. So it's a sort of like change course kind of timidity and highly vote-conscious decision that admonition articles use when they use their accessibility versions. The only difference is that instead of dealing with comedic things, it deals with visual things. Obviously, admonition articles are very inventive visually and out there visually, so that's really the only reason why the accessibility version on admonition articles exists, is the same exact thing that this Seriocomic footnote was trying to do in this article. It's as if the authors are saying, hey, I know these visuals are probably a little too much, but if you don't want that, you can go over here, and it sort of tries to ride both so that it can cast the widest net for upvotes. And so for the same reasons that Lieutenant Flops here does not like the Seriocomic footnote, I also don't like the accessibility version thing of admonition articles. And then the very last comment that we'll look at is Doc Sigma. I guess you could say this anomaly is in stable condition, which is just as good of a pun as the joke in the article, in my opinion. So anyway, this is a highly, highly divisive article. I do think that it has a little more thought sophistication into it than something like what Plague PJP would write, and others of the Neo-Law Foundation camp who would certainly just cut this off at the joke, because of course that's really, these people are essentially forcing the SCP format to dance for them like some kind of sad little monkey with symbols in its hand, and of course they're doing that just because they think they're funny. So I hopefully this conversation has elucidated how it is that even slightly in a subtle fashion, moving the center of focus for a humorous main list article away from I'm just trying to make a joke, can actually make the joke way much better and make the article way much better. The author, like I've said 1,000 times at this point, doesn't have to sacrifice everything we understand the Foundation to be to make room for a really bad joke, which is what the other authors that we've been talking about tend to do. So this is SCP-6612, and that is my take on this. I ultimately think this is, like I said, a ray of hope for the wiki, if only in the fact that it's a talking animal SCP that actually doesn't commit all the sins that we are used to seeing them do. 46 comments, amazing, in like 3 days. Pretty good shit. SCP-6845 is the next one. The title of this one is... Did we get the last title was Horse Joke? Not really that imaginative of a title. This one is titled Come Back to Us. Come Back to Us. And this is 6845. Okay, so pretty short article once again. When we have really, really short ones, I won't really hold your hand through it. I do think you should go read this one. This is a recommendation from me. And we'll go ahead and do it like we've been doing and just Quentin Tarantino the assessment first. But this is SCP-6845. This is also raising the bar. This is weightlifting the whole wiki. This is an amazing little article. It sets an atmosphere so nicely by leaving some interesting area effects around a central anomaly and insinuates some histories, pretty dark and disturbing histories that go on in this article and anomaly. It paints a really vivid image with its descriptions, and it knows just where to throw in some highly unsettling conclusions. The image here also is very, very striking and haunting. I want you to kind of just look at this. I'm not sure if you can see this very well. Let me, I'm going to dip out for just a second and you look at this image because it's, well, I didn't get, the screen didn't get any, any bigger. Anyway, you'll have to go look at this image yourself then because it's hard to see. Oh, I know what I can do. Duh. Okay. Check it out. So, I mean, it's almost better if you look at it from a distance, but this kind of looks vaguely humanoid, doesn't it? In a way, if you kind of squint, you know, if you didn't know better. And so the author does a fantastic job of bringing this out. So this is really a classic way to compose, where you take an image and you meditate on the image to the point where you bring out of it the most interesting aspects that can be put into a story. That's really how the first SCPs were written. Obviously, SCP-173 is an example, but really the first, you know, the whole first series of articles, you know, basically operated that way. So, you know, this kind of looks vaguely humanoid, as if it was in a prone position, maybe with its hands out next to its face, as if it was trying to crawl. That's sort of the initial thing that I got looking at it, and it absolutely plays into the article. So the author is really playing some very sort of sophisticated, I think, psychological games with the reader here. There's also this odd mechanism at play that's introduced in the article as part of the anomaly, where it looks as though these children who are crawling become more and more human the further they get away from the radius effect of this anomaly. And it gives a somewhat of a very sorrowful and twisted hope that a few of these kids that are in this article made it out of the radius and are actually in the world living alive. But anyway, this is just excellent short form that leaves you really in a state of agony by its implications by the end. It does sort of dovetail with Department of Abnormalities, and so I think that's a pretty tactful, a pretty appropriate decision here, a bold one, because it's, you know, it's kind of, it's a very specific shot. It's a very small probability of success when you try to do a Department of Abnormalities well. I think this author nails it, if only for the exquisite vibe that this article develops in very, very quick time. Not a lot of length, and it does some pretty interesting things in that length. So I definitely think that you should go read this. Highly, highly recommend it. The only thing I have a problem with this article really is that it seems as though these inscriptions, they sort of seem like they're sort of plot armor, you know, sort of like there so that we can get a better idea of what's going on. I mean, they seem to kind of jut out like a sore thumb, like they're there because the author wants them to tell us exactly what the author wants to tell us. It's almost like the plot is conjuring them up in a way. So, but all in all, this is a really, really good article. It is by The Alien Baby, who is not an author that I know. It looks as though this might be the third article, so they can get an author page now. There's some spoilers in there that kind of actually enhance my interpretation of this. After reading the spoilers, I actually learned a little bit more, thought a little bit differently about the article than what I initially took from it by myself. So I appreciate that, and this is just an excellent, excellent article, in my opinion. It looks like there was some changes that were made that I think were for the better. But yeah, so go check out 6845. This is pretty short and well worth your time. Really, really good stuff. All right, SCP-6816. Let's check this one out. We are on the home stretch. We're looking at the 14th, which was yesterday. This one is titled SCP-6816. Every action has its equal opposite reaction. So, okay, so looking at this, obviously, the author tells us who they are. So what's my relationship with this author? I've read a few articles from this author. We had a really nice one a couple weeks ago about the corner, the room, the cafeteria room corner. I've read a couple articles about this by this author in the meantime. One of them didn't do so well, but I thought it was decently good, so I reached out to this author. I don't know what they've said yet. So that's my relationship with that author. And that's it. Okay, so we have object class here. We see that it's anomalous. but it has a pending reclassification to Thaumiel, so that is good. That means this anomalous class is used correctly. Doesn't necessarily have to have a strike through. It's still used correctly because it's being reclassified, and it has its own designation. So this is a designation given to a reoccurring anomalous phenomenon affecting all known Foundation sites and facilities. It's characterized by the sudden appearance of various types of stationary office supplies, including ballpoint pens, pencils, highlighters, boxes of stapler pens, and colored paper clips. So the conprocs, as you can see, are just really, really thin, but they're at the same time detailed and specific enough to instill some intrigue and to inspire the readers. That's nice. The anomaly is bold in its scale, and that we've read it's affecting all the Foundation sites. I think this is a great picture. In an anomaly that could have been a lot of different pictures, this is not a bad decision. It showcases one of the more interesting views with all the colors of these paper clips. But on the other hand, I'm not really sure why the Foundation would be interested in taking a picture of what they understand to ultimately be non-anomalous paper clips, but that's okay. There's some tense disagreement here. For example, the first paragraph of the description is in the present tense, so SCP is the Foundation. And then the second paragraph is in the past tense, so these objects would usually appear. So, probably needs to be a little more in agreement there. Just a little bit of confusion, it seems. I do love the first sentence of the third paragraph. SCP was at first thought to be the result of Foundation personnel's negligence toward their own individual office items. It's a really nice thought and a really well written sentence. So I like that quite a lot. It actually comes back to play into the article as well. I think the author, as we get going on this addendum, this voice recording, starts to fumble the article. In fact, we get a cross-link to this author's own works from a few weeks ago that I mentioned, this corner here. So I think this is kind of a tasteless cross-link, a tasteless drop. We gave that article a nice positive review, so obviously I don't hold a grudge against this link, but it just feels very, very unnatural. We're introduced to a character who honestly, the dialogue of which goes very out of their way in order to cross-link and reference this other SCP that this author wrote. So I lose a little bit of respect for, in the read for that decision, but it's a negligible amount in my opinion, so we can move past that. Beyond that, the primary character here, Gerald Hogan, likewise, though, comes off as too unnatural with the fantastic conspicuousness of his character gestures, such as calling himself the Great Gerald Hogan. So, but no matter, I am, after all, the Great Gerald Hogan, one of, if not the greatest researcher and analyst in the various fields of hypothetical theoretics. Yada. So this sort of plays like a bad circus leader act at this moment in the article. There's also a little finesse in situating this character. The author has to spell out very awkwardly that the researcher is an analyst and in certain fields so that, we as readers can understand that. It just kind of seems like a pretty wooden delivery system for that information. I love the contralateral characterization of this next doctor, who comes across as blurry because they're a member of the Unreality Department. So I thought that was kind of cool, and I liked their conversation that they had. But unfortunately, the name given to the doctor is Dr. Exempli Gratia von etc. So, when you see this right here, blank, let me type this in. E.g., this anomaly is about office supplies, e.g. pencils, paper clips. When you see that e.g., that's basically like, you can read that as, for example, right? So this anomaly is about office supplies. For example, pencils, paper clips. Well, it's Latin, and it stands for exempli gratia, right? It means like an example. And so, and then of course we all know what etc. means, right? Etc. etc. Right? So it's just I mean, this naming the doctor, Dr. Exempli Gracia von etc. is on the level. It's a mistake on par with placeholder McDoctorate. I really hope we don't see character names that are like eye-rollingly attached to their themes or departments of study. I was listening to a Cactus interview last night, and one of the characters, the King of Blood, the surname of the King of Blood was Sanguine. I mean, God. Come on, guys. Now, this is the same way. I feel like I'm in a children's cartoon, but I do love how the author makes, like I said, the character visually blurred in real life because they work with the Unreality department. We go down to the second addendum, which is an attached file. We get a lot of redactions and expungements in this, and I don't think in a good way. While these are certainly not amateur expungements, there's not enough solid context to render them effective. This is in part due to the fact that the surrounding context is mostly technobabble. For example, SCP Arc would then proceed to heavily centralize and instead directly ameliorate the chosen intro topic concept, enhancing and refining it as time goes on. Eventually, the concept would be wholly purified, thus rendering this useless. I can kind of squint and try to make that make sense, but it's not easy, and I still don't really understand what this is trying to say. Furthermore, the author's potential awareness of how uninformative this passage of the article is might be suggested by the inclusion of in-character commentary afterwards, right here, from our two characters. So there's no real way to justify why these statements are in the documentation at this point, so it comes off as the author trying to compensate through the fourth wall for a understood and clear lack of clarity in regards to what the prose is trying to accomplish and probably not doing a good enough job at. So the ideas here just don't have enough strength on their own to push through to the reader, and certainly not when you have to add something like this to try to help that and buttress that and fortify that. And then the final addendum down here tries to spin the entirety of the article right into a zany Neo-Lol Foundation manner, making not only one of the actually both of these researchers sort of slapstick comedians, but they recontextualize the whole anomaly as a way, really the only existence of it is to prevent some incompetent doctor from losing his pens, and just who keeps begging others for their pens. So, I mean, ultimately, I think this was a promising anomaly that was playful with the ubiquitous and relatable concept of someone always losing or misplacing those little but necessary office supply kind of stuff, post-it notes, pencils, whatever. But it really had no clue what it was doing with this idea. It was sort of like watching a bowling ball sort of whirling back and forth from one side of the bowling lane to the other before finally hitting the gutter and falling into the gutter without knocking down any pins ultimately. It just seems like there's a strong identity crisis with this article, and the article's impact comes off as about as blurry and static as Dr. E.G., etc. here. So, and then if we go to the comments, even the author's post, the spoilers, even the author's own commentary can't do a great job of bringing this idea home. So this is what it says. Don't you hate it when people borrow your shit and not return it? If you really think about it, that right there should be the largest form of ongoing entropy. Am I right? I mean, are you right? No, not really. I mean, it seems kind of like a weak justification there. So, with all due respect, I just don't think this article is very good. I can't really put this one in meh because there's just too many issues with it. But I did finish it because it wasn't super long. So I think I'm gonna put it in meh. I mean, it's a mishmash. It doesn't understand what it's doing. It doesn't understand itself. I think the rating is probably pretty appropriate for it right now, at least. And I you know what? I'm sorry. Because of the inclusion of this doctor, etc. Guy, I'm actually going to change my mind, and I'm going to put this into actively lowering the bar. It's just terrible how you basically have a nice idea, you cheapen it with this really awful character with a terrible name, You make things a little more obfuscated. This doesn't really add to the article in any good way. It doesn't clarify anything. It only obfuscates and confuses. And then as a way to sort of clean up on aisle 2, you basically just try to spin the whole article into some sort of like funny thing that's basically just slapstick humor. You might as well have the doctors throw pies in each other's face as a way to end the article. It's just not very good. So I'm sorry, but I have to put this in actively lowering the bar, even though it doesn't have a ton of attention on it right now. It's just this is not what you want to see people doing on the wiki. This is a rather ugly sequence of events this article goes through before it finally decides to end. So that's that one. I do hate it because that author is really good, I know. All right, the next one is the SCP-6962. Let's see what this one is called. 6962, the name of this one is called Master Exploder. Master Exploder. Interesting name. Okay, 6162. Let's talk about this one. Isn't that one 6? Oh, sorry, this is 6962. 6962. It is Master Exploder, though. That's the name. Okay, so just starting off, I just want to say, not that this matters a whole lot. This doesn't really play into my assessment, but I do want to notice it when it happens. I love how this looks. I adore how this article looks. It's so clean. It's so crisp. I love the smoke gray background from the old quote boxes. It seems to be sort of liberated here. It's just a fantastically clean CSS. I'm not a fan of the font. It feels a little small, a little claustrophobic, and a little cramped, but I can get over that. This is just a really, really good looking article. I love the way this is presented. Okay, that doesn't matter though. Moving on. So I'm immediately attracted in this article to how brief the introductory documentation is. There's a sentence for the conprox, maybe 2 for the description, and then we're on to some testing logs. So I'll say that these are sort of Lego conprox and that they sort of are cobbled together really unspecifically. They don't really have a lot to say. They don't really do anything. And honestly, we might not even have them there and everything be exactly the same. So I don't think the author has capitalized on conprox or demonstrated that they know how to use these things very effectively. The initial sentence of the description is also very, very clunky and not smooth. So let's read this. SCP is a 30-centimeter tall stuffed doll designed to look like a red wizard donning an eye patch kept inside a square plastic container. Now, this is not an easy sentence to work your way through, and it takes some compositional prowess in the clinical tone in order for to the author have gotten this right and a little better. But I can tell you that the issue is in the phrase "designed to look like." This phrase is just a glamorized version of the dreaded appears to be or is seemingly a better clinical way to present this sentence and idea would be something like this. SCP is a stuffed 30-centimeter tall red wizard doll donning an eye patch. Boom. If you take all these adjectives right here and front load them to the front of the sentence, you can bypass the awkwardness of the designed to look like, and really avoid the simile, because that's what this sentence tries to do. It's basically look like that's a simile. Okay, so that doesn't work well clinically. So if you just you can rearrange that sentence to make it a little better. Now, having said that, the object really is kind of interesting. I think it's given an interesting anomalous quality that, of course, lends itself well to testing logs, which is that it can detonate anything within viewing distance. So, of course, we do get testing logs almost immediately. So that's good instincts on the author's part, I think. But honestly, the more we get into this, the more I see that there are areas of improvement when it comes to the polish and the tone. The syntactical ability is not as developed in this article as it could be. For example, let's take a look at a few examples just to show you what I mean. The following is a list of tests done to discern SCP-2's anomalous capabilities and limitations. That reads really awkwardly, and we've already seen this one time in this cast. where people are using the word done as a verb. These tests done to discern. It's not. That's not really fluent clinical tone right there. That's a misstep in the footworking of your clinical tone and composition and phraseology. It also becomes apparent that using the noun list creates sort of a turbulence in the read. So once again, a better reimagining of this sentence, I think, might be, the following tests were performed to discern. Boom. Done, once again, sounds kind of hick. Don't do that. And then some later instances like this later in this same little paragraph, the tests unless otherwise specified, were performed in Site-32's testing rooms, with a D class being told to attempt to detonate the specific item and the relevant researchers overseeing. Can you feel how cumbersome that sentence is when you try to read it? You should always be reading your works aloud, getting a text-to-speech program to perform it for you so that you can listen to it. The phrases here in this article are in constant dissonance with one another and trip each other up. In this case, if you remove the word being from being told to, right, it's 80% better already. So with a D class told to attempt to detonate the specific item, that's already better. But the best ultimate cleanup I can come up with for this is, unless otherwise specified, the tests were performed in Site-32's testing rooms. In each, a D class was told to detonate a specified item. And we actually don't even need this last phrase, right, at all. Because it's understood. I mean, who would be letting a D class blow things up otherwise? Of course, there are relevant researchers overseeing. This is you might as well say that they're in a building where the SCP is. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, in my opinion, hanging out there. Let me do one thing real quick. Okay, trying to turn that volume down just a wee bit more. Okay, so all that to say, the article sort of feels a little rusty, particularly with the delivery of the composition, the phraseology, and certainly the clinical tone. There's this kind of rust that we see all over the article. The involved D class refused to continue testing. You don't need the word involved. We already know that the D class is involved. Another one here. Flames erupt from inside of the fridge as the fridge door flies. Just take away the second fridge. Don't need to have the second fridge there. There's also similar sort of awkward moments that I don't even know how to fix these. The balloon quickly inflated to near bursting size. The balloon expanded to the balloon expanded to nearly the point of lysing. I don't know. There's got to be a better way to say that. Near bursting size is not a good phrase at all. What else? I know this is in here. A house of cards, this time instructed to view the house as a collective rather than multiple individual cards. I won't go on like this. I think you get the gist, but the article is filled with technical trip-ups, and it absolutely needs some polish. And actually, it deserves it, because this article here, especially conceptually, gets really, really, really good. So back to the concept of the thing. So in the testing logs, really by the fourth of these, where we start to look at the ink, onward, the testing logs become really, really creative with very, very witty, uncompromisingly logical, and even appropriately funny entries into this testing log sequence. And glancing at the sidebar at this point in this section, I was worried that the testing logs would get very, very slow and repetitive, but they stayed very, very fresh, which is not easy and is a testament to the imagination of the author here. In fact, there was even one section that sort of knocked me on my ass and flew a circle around me, where one test is repeated over and over a few times. Here it is right here. It's really the same test. It's repeated over and over and over. And it's just the clinical document-based way of communicating that these researchers are sort of taking a moment to have some fun. So the author does a great job at continuing that and sort of pitting the more fun-loving aspects of the Foundation with the formality and professionalism of the Foundation as an institution. It's very reminiscent of SCP-5031, which if you don't know what that one is, SCP, you might know what it is. Everybody kind of does. 5031. This is that sort of like another monster, yet another murder monster by Pepper's Ghost, which sort of plays around with the seriousness of the Foundation in the same way. And yes, that's an absolute compliment comparing the portions of this article to that one. Absolutely. So still, I think a few of these testing logs could be removed and the article really have nothing lost except just a gain in the pacing of it. By the second addendum, we get down here, it's a transcript. We have some breaks in character of the tone, which so far is a relative strength of the testing logs. So for example here, the director can be seen sitting in his office chair, flipping through mountains of paper laid at his desk. You know, that's a little too purple, a little too flowery, in my opinion, for this this documentation here. And especially if you're trying to cast the dichotomy, the sort of contradictory forces of intra-Foundation life, where you're trying to be professional and also goofy, you probably need to very staunchly and strictly make sure that one side of that divide is, is being very fidelitous to that sort of professionalism that you're setting up as a sort of counterbalance and sort of point of friction. So the transcript here I think is great. I think it has very, very believable, enjoyable dialogue. The situation itself is well written. It has great characters that it creates out of that. This is a scene that I would love to see acted out. Maybe in like a theater, like two actors sort of like take this as material to sort of compete with in a theater competition or something. I would love to see this scene acted out. I think it's just remarkably organic, very genuine. I think the author is really cool to kind of see this. The author is clever enough to interject some sort of meta commentary into the Foundation, or really the SCP Wiki, into the discussion. So this line right here, the Foundation loves nothing more than needless bureaucracy. So this is obviously somebody who's taking a little bit of a slight at, let's say, something like the SCP Foundation staff. But there are a couple other gush moments that I thought were really, really, really good in this article. Yeah, in February, you guys ran more tests on this stupid jar filler than you did on everything else in the site combined. I just think that's a great little note thing to pull out of the imagination. The author finds a perfect note to end this article on, addressing the tug of war that we've been seeing of unprofessionalism versus, sort of convivial, sort of jovial kind of approach to these things, an excuse to kind of let some steam off, if you will. Doing so in official documentation. I love the inclusion here. It's so creative. Really puts a very creative and interesting twist on the whole read, where they wonder if this is a mimetic hazard anomaly that's causing people to act unprofessionally. That's just, there's so many layers of cleverness there, and that's really how you can contain humor in a main list article without making it a bastardized version of a J that you decided to not include as a J because you're a Neo-Law Foundation author. So this is how you do that very well, and then kudos to the author for doing that. This is a very strict article in ways, and yet has an equal measure of a loose humor and a fun that doesn't get overbaked to the point of total incompetency on the part of the Foundation. The author's weaknesses, I think, here are phraseology of the clinical tone. The author's strengths are situational insight, a brimming imagination that can take a very simple anomalous doll's mechanic to almost dizzying heights, and have some of the most natural and effortlessly believable dialogue I've read in what feels like years. This dialogue is a case study in how to write dialogue incredibly, incredibly well. And then if we go down to the comments here, we find out that on top of all that, this is a first article. So this is Optimistic Lucio, who if anybody knows me, I'm aware of. I know who this individual is. So I'm always happy to see a neck-deep staff member writing, and it just is icing on the cake that this article is actually such a fantastic read, in my opinion. So there's some really great comments here. Dicedron says, this has the distinct vibe of a lighthearted Series 1, taking Series 7. The research notes signed by each researcher, the slight sense of law foundation, I like it. I have expected the article to turn darker with the memetics, but it gives us an unexpectedly human core. So, yeah, although I'm not a fan of the testing logs personally, the vibes of the characters and how you use testing logs as characterization of not only the characters but of the staff is pretty cool. And yeah, so I think these are all really, really good points. So just to our tier, this is 6962. I really want to give this weightlifting the whole wiki because it was just that refreshing of a read when it comes to the characterization of the Foundation, the dialogue, the just absolute horsepower of creativity that this author has when it comes to just starting with what honestly is a very mundane and almost unimaginative anomaly and just like taking it, like unpacking it just like endlessly into these incredibly creative moments. So I really, really wanted to put this at the very top, weightlifting the whole wiki. But it just, because of all of its technical missteps, we took a look at all of those awkward clinical phrases and those real fumbles. It's like the author is not really that fluent in how to, very smoothly find their way through some of these sentences. So for that reason, just to be fair, I think it has to be a ray of hope. But this is a very, very bright ray of hope. And, we always have that second sophomoric slump, not all of us, but not trying to put too much pressure on the author, but I am looking forward to what the author writes next. And I think this is a fantastic first article. I mean, the sophistication and just talent that's in this article is certainly higher than most people that I see. So I think with a few attempts and a little more refining, a little more experience at this, this author could be really, really good. I'm really, really, really impressed with this article. All right. SCP 6961. This one is called... What is this one called? Uh-oh, it's gone. Oops. Okay. That must have been one that wasn't doing well that I forgot about. We're actually going to go out of order. Oh, this one's gone too? Seriously? SCP 6... Oh, man. Oh, no, that was... Sorry. Okay, so let's try this one more time. So 6962. Was that the one we just read? Yeah. 6962. Sorry, gang. 6961. I am totally thrown off here. So 6961. Oh, okay. So that was The Ruler of Everything by Calibold. That one was deleted. It seems as though, I mean, it was actually in the positive. It was like plus 10, plus 11. But I guess that was an embarrassment for that author, So that one's gone. Whatever. So we will finish up tonight. We have one left. I want to thank you for hanging out. It's been almost 3 hours. I think we'll hit this at the 3-hour mark just fine. Oh, God. Oh, my God. This one. This is going to be a doozy to end on, I'll tell you that. Holy God. Help me. Let me say a little prayer. Will you say a prayer as well? Holy God. Okay. So, this is SCP-PL-046. We have an impressive content warning box talking about sexual, gore, sensitive topics, sensitive events, brutality. The article features clearly described sex scene. Okay, so already we have typos and grammatical issues with translation rust. The article features clearly described sex scene, as well as murder, racism, sexism. There's also strongly implied rape and a serial killer that actually existed. Okay. And, we get a little adult content splash here as well. So we scroll down cautiously, because I already have a bad feeling about this article. We scroll down cautiously, and we see this. I can't help but laugh out loud at the image here of this very sultry woman who is apparently some sort of tactical agent. Looks like somebody just trying to do some cosplay. So Jackrabbit, eat your heart out. My God, look at this. Let me zoom in a little bit. This is literally an image that is on the adult splash page of this article. Does that look in any way believable, or does that look like something that comes out of Hollywood? Well, it looks like something that comes out of Hollywood, doesn't it? And so we'll get to that, but there's a reason for it. So anyway, we, if you're not 18, you should leave at this point. Just in the stream, it's certainly not worth it. You're not going to get much out of this. In fact, I'll go ahead and I will go ahead and tell you the end here. This article is SCP-PL046 actively making the wiki worse. Absolutely, no question about it. So that's my assessment. We'll go into exactly why. So we get, first of all, I got to point these things out. We get that really, really obnoxious floaty box on the left-hand side. This is the SCP Wiki equivalent of a beggar. And it follows you around, and it begs you to recognize the authors and the title of the piece. And in an evolution of that desperation, we now have some chat log-like commentary from the authors on the left-hand side that follows you through the entire article. Look at that when I scroll. It catches it and then moves with it. It's just absolutely desperate. It's so distracting. It's like some snot-nosed kid that follows you around everywhere and is asking if he can wipe his nose on your arm. Just bad, just really, really bad here. And even so, the commentary, the quibs here aren't really funny. It's just really sad what authors are willing to do to an article. It's really sad. It's like putting one of those really ridiculously large, like absolutely hideous spoilers on the back of a geoprism or something like that. It's just, oh my gosh! Like I can't imagine what lack of taste you have to do something like this. Anyways, but let's get to the actual article. Before that, the same can be said, obviously, of the CSS theme, which is loudly pink and dotted with div boxes that feel like the visuals are constantly battling the text for your attention, which is obviously not a good thing to have going on in your article. Getting into the prose here, we get some typical translation rust. For example, update from the day, April 21st, 95. That doesn't really exist in English. That's kind of reads very poorly. Backing up to the visuals, now that we've seen just how unpolished some of the translated prose is here. I say this a lot, but again, if you're clearly spending more time polishing the looks of the article than the actual writing, that's a way to signal, in my opinion, that you aren't very good at writing. And so as we go through the article, we get a consistent dose of this rust with really the improper use of prepositions. We have things like of in place of by, those things are mixed up. Awkward phrases, run-on sentences, sentences that lack appropriate punctuation or even grammar. There are sentences that miss complete ending punctuation entirely, even when those things should be question marks. So just general confusion in this article. It does not help the read at all. And there are some really other more jarring components to the article, such as that the first treated and photoshopped picture of that lusty girl that we looked at, if we go back, this girl right here that I told you was kind of Hollywood-esque, that I know you agree with me. This is a picture of actress Jenna Coleman. So this is taken straight from a show, which cannot be CC. I guarantee it. And then this kind of odd thing continues as we go into the article, where we see a picture here of Professor Conrad Kruger, who is very clearly a picture of William Dafoe, the actor. That's William Dafoe, and you probably know him from Spider-Man. He's the Green Goblin, and he plays a bunch of roles. He's actually a fantastic actor. But here he is in an SCP document, apparently playing the role of Professor Kruger. And then if you scroll down, the next image that we see is very, very clearly, wherever it is, of Saul Goodman from Better Call Saul. with his accomplice Lavelle. You know, I just can't imagine what the authors are doing at this point. You know, this looks so stupid. It looks so ridiculous. Like, why? You know, how in the world could you put this in an article? I don't know. I think the anomaly itself, just getting a little more away from these gimmicky things and into what could be said to be the meat of the article, although the meat of the article is the gimmicks and the visuals, the visual chlamydia going on here, herpes really, because it spreads quickly. But the anomaly here I think is pretty refreshing. It's pretty spritzy. It takes the trope of a attractive slasher movie survivor girl and approaches that pataphysically. So that's interesting, but it's also at the same time very unclear how this is actually a pataphysical anomaly and not just the feature of being attractive, like the feature of attractiveness. The article makes zero effort to justify this as anomalous, and it just sort of assumes itself and runs with it. There's a very small attempt with the suspension of aging that this article introduces. So let's see where that is. Yeah, so an additional feature is the suspension of the cell aging process, stopping the biological age of the instance, which is fine. That's perhaps a nice way to sort of introduce some actual anomalousness into this article, into this design here. But the problem with that is that the very next sentence says that the phenomenon operates at intervals of a maximum of 1 year and a minimum of 1 week. So I'm not sure how pronounced this effect of suspension of cell aging could possibly be, given that we could be looking at a week and at max we could be looking at a year. It certainly doesn't help raise this article to any status of dealing with anything anomalous at all. Not sure how they would even know that. Despite this, the -1 POI, who is really the first obtained instance of one of these attractive women who is subject to this pataphysical serial killer because they're attractive, I guess. So the -1 is here, is interviewed in this addendum, and despite the anomaly not really being well defined and absolutely no way is anomalous actually at all by the justification provided in the article, this -1 individual is hyper aware of her instance as an anomalous thing and being affected by an anomaly. So it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. Anyway, aside from that, the article truly does mean what it said in its adult splash content warning page in its content warning section. There are some pretty graphic scenes in this that are not pleasant to read through. And then just kind of bypassing all of that, the next addendum, at some point, the authors pull a screen wipe, which is, right here where the text of this in-universe documentation wipes away, and we see that a lot, in pataphysics particularly, but it's almost always a way to just give the authors an out so that they can give up on writing in the document so that they can insert their fan fiction in the middle of it. So I honestly called the article here. I'm not going to read anymore. Once I got here, it's just really poorly written. It's not polished at all. The whole thing is just eye aids. It's very difficult to look at. I can't make heads or tails of why William Dafoe, why Saul Goodman, and why Jenna Coleman are hanging out in this SCP. I mean, I can't imagine that these are CC images. I don't think that they'll last long on the site anyway. I do want to bring this one thing out. If we go to the author, I mean, this is just doesn't make any sense. It's +8. There's no discussion. The only comment is the author post. But we do get some interesting information here from the author. The author commentary explains why this article comes off so cobbled, so haywire, so unprofessional, so disgustingly pasted together of just so many disparate elements that don't seem to have any congruity with one another whatsoever. And the reason is, as we see here, is that this article was the result of a contest where entries were given points by completing quote-unquote challenges, such as the Super Adult Challenge, which includes all content warnings existent on the Polish branch, etc. and etc. So that explains why there's so many completely disrupting images of celebrities. I'm sure I didn't read all these, but I'm guessing that there's a completing challenge where you include, I guess American celebrity people in the article somehow. Like I said, there's no way that those are CC photos. These challenges can be seen in this author comment right here. And in honesty, the challenges themselves are more interesting than the article that the authors produced in order to meet them, okay? So, yeah, it's bad. It's bad. So really what you have here is an article that overextends itself in order to meet the largest number of completely unrelated point-based prompts. And so, yeah, I mean, you're going to get a trash article like this almost every time if you do that. There's absolutely zero finesse here. The article comes off as just completely confused. It's a really aneurysmal read just from the first glimpse of it visually to the last tolerable word of the prose. It's just a really awful article. So, like I said, it's true that I didn't finish the article, but it's just so bad that doesn't capture really how I feel about it. So I think it's actively making the article, the wiki, worse in that it has existed and survived on the site. Once again, there's no discussion on this article whatsoever. It's just a very bad, sad showing for the wiki in this article. Definitely gives critics of the SCP Wiki something to point to in order to very clearly communicate the downfall, the supposed downfall of the standards there. This is just an absolutely terrible article. So I don't know how this has survived. The fact that this is even on the site is kind of a joke, I think. I don't really understand why it's here. So this is completely incompatible with the SCP Wiki having decent standards. So I hope this goes away. I hope that people can rectify this error. All right, so there's our spread for the week. As you can see, just looking at it sort of schematically here, we got an equal number of articles that were weightlifting the SCP as we did those that were bringing down the global quality of the SCP. So that's an interesting spread. In fact, the whole thing is entirely symmetric, isn't it? You got 2 up here, 2, 4 down there, 4 up there, and then 1 in the middle. So this is an interesting week. It's the week that has the least amount of just average articles, a very polemicized, a very galvanized, a very polarized week for the SCP Wiki. I think this week we've seen the wiki at its best, and we've seen the wiki at its worst. So it's nice to get a decent amount of articles back. Not that we didn't have a fun time last week with 5, but I do love reading these. I love reading containment fiction. I love thinking about containment fiction and involving myself with it. So I do appreciate you hanging out with us this far. Hanging out. If you've made it all the way through this, then I applaud your attention span and your dedication to the space and to the topics that we're covering here and the articles that we're reading. I know the authors really appreciate that because, who else is going into this much detail for every single article? Probably not many people, if any, besides myself. But that's why I love doing this. It's a lot of fun. It's a challenge. I learn something new every time I do it, and it really makes it worthwhile to read those articles that are weightlifting the wiki that are just so unbelievably good. So we will post that tier maker to the Twitter in case you want to look at that again, just to see which ones are the ones that we recommend, that we think that, or I recommend and think are the best of the week. But yeah, so that was tonight. I appreciate you hanging out tonight. I think we're going to try to have an episode of SCP Config colon SCP meta kind of thing on Sunday at noon CST. So maybe you'll join us for that. And don't forget that if you go to, let's see, configmagazine.com, we have this contest going on. And like I said, the winners are going to be announced in just a few hours, basically the winner. So go check out these articles. This page will be on the wiki, on the Config Magazine page for a while after the contest ends tonight. So you have a chance to go read all these entries now that we've covered all the SCPs for you. All right, so hopefully to see you on Sunday. If not, the next time I'll be around is Tuesday night, obviously doing a reaction series. We'll start something new that should be fun. This has been SCP-CRNP, a.k.a. Like a Leopard. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I hope you learned something. I hope this was an enjoyable and educational watch. I certainly had a good time, and I hope to do it again. Maybe next week we'll have Harmony back. Hopefully we will. We missed her tonight. Wish her well. All right, have a great weekend, and I'll see you later.